We do a roll call of the elected officials. We have George Hanley, we have Becky Bogdan, we have Gary Garrett, Patrice McKay, Rachel Whipple, and Craig Christensen. Do we have anyone online, Malia? Oh, we have Mayor Kafusi on Zoom. Okay. All right. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the council may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. When speaking, please be sure to use a microphone so that the record is clear and those attending virtually can hear you. Please also be sure to limit side conversations as they interfere with the audio recording. If you need to have a side conversation, please step out of the work meeting room. Now, this is our second budget work meeting. And so we narrowed down 3 topics last time, and we are here again to discuss them in greater detail and try and narrow them down even more, right? In the past, the council has had, I'd say, too many items to focus on and be really, truly productive and get those things done. Where our goal this year is to have 3 distinct goals that we can get done and have the administration on board to help us without it being an overwhelming, burdensome thing that has too many pieces. So where should we start? We want to start with, do we really talk about the home ownership piece, or is that one pretty?
Yeah, so the first item should be budget presentation priorities, and I don't know if Scott wants to kick that off and turn it over to the departments.
Okay, great. So Scott
Well, first I want to say thank you to the council from the staff that the positioning of the budget priorities is in the right sequence now. And I think this is perfect to be able to take what comes out of today's meeting and bring it to all the departments as we go through this process. So we just thought probably the best way to start out would be, and I know there's also going to be a presentation at the next work meeting from John that's going to go probably more in depth, but an overall idea of the budget climate going in, because that really does affect some of the decisions and priorities that we go forward with. So at this point, I'll turn it over to John Borgett to set the tone for what we're seeing in the budget for this year.
So last week, I kind of went over the quarterly report, kind of giving you, do you have a question?
he's
It's on right here. Hopefully they can hear okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Anyway, last week we went over the quarterly report, kind of gave you a little update on where we're looking at in the current fiscal year, fiscal 24. And I just kind of, from a high level perspective, our overall revenues for 24 are expected to increase the 23 numbers. But what we're seeing is some leveling of revenues, and we're seeing from the overall economy that we're just not experiencing the growth that we had experienced in years past. I think you can see that from a statewide perspective as well as from a national economy perspective. And so we had anticipated going into the budget that the revenues were going to be higher. This is fiscal going the 24 budget. We're going to slow down, but they slowed down a little bit more than we anticipated. And so as we look at, and as we've reviewed the revenues, and we'll talk about this more in detail next week, as Scott mentioned, we do expect and feel like revenues are going to increase some over what we're projecting for this current year, but not significant. And so what we're anticipating as we've looked at it, and once again, it's a moving target, and as we get more information, get more sales tax data, it adjusts as we go through the budget process. But right now, and I don't think it'll change, but not dramatically, we are expecting the revenue budget for fiscal 25 to be slightly lower than the 24 adopted budget. And what that does is that creates some challenges, and specifically a lot of the payroll related costs cost money, as we do different adjustments to employees. We deal with medical insurance, other things. And the way that we typically pay for those costs is through increase in revenues, okay? And so as we look at it right now, it's going to be challenging. We've already had a number of discussions with administration. We're having discussions with directors, but the overall climate is going to be, we anticipate that it's going to be a tight budget. It's going to be difficult to fund supplemental requests of any significance, because our goal is, number one, to deliver to the council a balanced budget. We also feel it's very important that we continue to be able to keep, attract, and retain good talent with our employees. And so that's going to be our primary focus. And so I just wanted to make you aware that it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a challenging year. Yes.
Counselor Hanley.
Actually, Becky's first. Well, my question is about the money that we've been saving every year.
Fund balance.
And the rainy day fund, or whatever we call it, the emergency fund. Seems like we've been generously putting into the fund balance and into that other fund for the past several years. So in your description of what you just, of the anticipated budget, are you assuming the same numbers? I'm trying to remember. I think the rainy day fund was only if that extra is available, right? I mean, these aren't budgeted, I guess. I can't remember. Help me remember. I'm just wondering if those are factored into what you just said. Like, would we have any flexibility with that? Well, we were pretty close to the 35%.
Yeah, and I think we're about 32.5, almost 33% this fiscal year. That money is available. But one of the things that we try to look at is, number one, starting off with a balanced budget. Sometimes during the year, you'll have, unexpected things or results that fund balance can be used for. One of the challenges, if we were to submit a budget where expenses are larger than revenues, the question is the decrease that we're experiencing right now kind of an anomaly and a one-time event, and then the following year, revenues are going to come back, we're going to be okay? Or are we setting up a model where it's going to be really difficult going forward to balance budgets with revenues, because what we've done in essence is not addressed the issue of revenues, expenses exceeding revenues by just balancing or doing a budget. Now, Utah County, you probably may have all heard, but they actually submitted a budget this year that utilized their fund balance of about $9.5 million, which is very significant. Okay. And they just looked at it and just says, this is an anomaly. And that's the approach we're going to take. And the council could decide to do that. But once again, you're dealing with one-time dollars potentially for ongoing expenses. And so traditionally, and the tradition of the city of Provo has been to deliver a balanced budget and then utilize the fund balance for unforeseen events or for opportunities that it can be used for during the year, and not starting off right off the bat with use of fund balance.
John, I think George is asking, in the budget, are we forced by policy we've put in place to put a certain amount of money in, like, the emergency fund or not?
Yeah,
That's what he's asking. He's asking.
No.
Contributing to
What
it.
the state basically says is that you have to have at least 5%, and the maximum amount you can have is 35%, and we're about 33.
Your budget numbers that you're describing right now would assume a zero contribution to fund balance and zero contribution to rainy day.
That's correct. We're just,
That's-
sorry, my answer was so long.
Probably helpful for all of us.
And very early in the process.
Very early, yeah.
Okay,
we haven't even-
Counselor Bogdan.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so now I'm confused.
Okay.
Because last week I asked the question of how are we gonna pay for the additional increase in payroll? And I was told that, at least how I understood it, that we would have an increase in revenue And now I'm hearing we're not gonna have a increase in revenue, it's gonna be kind of flat.
So I can go back and listen, but I thought that the answer that I gave when you asked that question is that we would make it a priority. We may have to make reductions in certain areas, but we feel like retaining and keeping our firefighters and being competitive was a high priority. And so therefore we may have to make cuts in other areas, but we would make that a priority and we would come to the council with a balanced budget. Don't believe I ever said that we were just going to be paying it from revenues. So anyway, that's part of our challenge. It's likely that another thing that's going to happen this year, and we've done it every year, and you'll find out a little bit more about this next week, is that we have a market study each year that Daniel Softly and his team does. And they go through and review all the positions and come back to the council and say, hey, look, we have these areas that are not in line. We're recommending that we make some adjustments. And once again, when that comes in, traditionally for a number of years, we've always looked at those and acted on them so that we can remain competitive. Is it easy or an easy solution? No, but we work through and come back with what we feel like is a good approach to be able to pay for those kind of things.
Okay, thanks. And then do we get a list of the cuts along with the budget? Like this is what we cut, but this is what we foresee the budget to be?
We definitely can provide that. You know, what we provide to the council is a listing, and we're going through the revenues next week, but we'll provide all the revenues that go into the general fund as well as all the expenditures related there and the balance. And then we let the council know what supplemental requests are there, and based on requests, we can provide any areas that we've had to make some reductions in order to balance the budget.
Yeah, I know Becky wants to see that and others do too. It'd be good to include like just a list of the top 3 or every reduction if you know.
We're happy to do that.
Okay, thanks so much, John. Councilor Christensen.
You say, you mentioned it's going to be down. Are we talking about 0.5%, 4%, 3%? I'm just wondering order of magnitude. What you're projecting.
So right now, you know, once again, it's moving all the time, but we are just projecting that it's going to be what I would call in total dollars, slightly down. Okay. Not significantly down, but not to the same level as the prior year. And then with the budget, with the prior budget. So it'll be slightly down from last year's budget. So I would just say that we're still working through the numbers, but as we anticipate that it's going to be less than what we budgeted for 24.
So at this point, you just see arrows being down, not necessarily an amount. You're not confident in saying an amount. Because again, I just have a hard time understanding scope. Am I better to think it's going to be like flat-ish?
Yeah, I would. What we're looking at, see, each year when we have all the different things that we pay for employees, we have our merit increases, we have our health insurance related costs, we have other adjustments to market and whatnot. Those items, they all add up. And so those items are not going to be paid for likely with increasing revenues. We're going to have to find other options and things to help pay for those because our revenues we're going to be starting off not getting an additional contribution from increased revenues overall from the general fund.
And there's still significant reports coming in. We just got our November report, which broke the trend, and we have shared that with everybody from department heads to council, everybody, that our November was actually up. Now we're waiting with high interest to see what the trend is for December, and that should come in later on this month. So we are getting to some very specific budget questions right now when we're really at the objective level right now. But I understand why that's important, but it is also important to understand we are still getting the numbers too and the trends and go through those.
That's fair. I was just looking for order of magnitude. I don't know what that means when you say it. So as we then talk about priorities, do we need to cut back? Are we going to be about equal? So I was just looking for general direction. or not general, you said direction, what the implications of that are, and maybe we don't know yet, so we don't need to double click on something that's not.
Well, I can just give you a high level number. I mean, right now our general fund is about $85 million. And right now we're anticipating we're gonna be down about $500,000, okay? Pretty small when you consider 85 million, but when you consider that you've got to make that up plus
That's fair.
what you need for employees and other costs that come up with the budget,
Yes,
it can be a challenge.
that's helpful.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you, Kay.
Thank you, John. Okay, now we're gonna start going over priorities, or what's next, Justin? Oh, there we go. All right, so we came up with 3 priorities last time. So, Michael,
Chair McKay, I believe that the format that we're going over right now is Scott has prepared a presentation where he's gonna give some feedback from all of these priorities. And then once you guys have received feedback, item 2, Justin's gonna get up there and we're gonna go through and try and narrow down the priorities a little bit right now. So we're still in the information
great.
stage right
So we'll go like over item 1, the administration will give us our feedback, and then we'll narrow down.
Yeah.
And then move to item number 2.
now. Item number 2 is where we're narrowing it down.
Okay, well, okay. We're gonna go talk over all of them though, too.
Yeah, that's what Scott's doing.
Right, and we'll finish up, and this will go very quickly. First and mostly, we acknowledge the receipt of these draft council budget priorities. And as we get to the exercise today, this will become what we will communicate to every department as the priorities to keep in mind as they are developing their budget all the way through. As the administrative, we would propose these added budget priorities that is really looking at our employee talent retention and possibly looking at the 3-leg stool approach to where we have our merit increases, which are annual increases for those employees that are performing well in their jobs. The market study, which takes a full assessment of all compared to our competition. And the 3rd leg of that would be the COLA. And the reason why those are most efficient to work together is that for a lot of time, the city did not do the COLA, but you would see much larger market studies because we became very reactive. We would get behind and then it would be a bigger swipe with the count. So if we can try to keep those, and it's an objective, and obviously with numbers coming in, but if we can try to keep that approach, I think that is the healthiest and it has the less large swings of needs that can come out from a budget standpoint. It's easier to deal with in a lot of ways. The COLA really looks at both the market that or the economy that we're experiencing now, and then the market of what other cities are doing also. So it's not just an independent assessment, it is looking at all these things. And I guess Daniel Softly is on the next work session to go over all those things and the logic behind those studies. A second one, which is one I don't know if I've ever seen on the priorities list, but maybe in a tight budget, it should be there. And that's the continued efficient delivery of our services, projects, and programs. These are the things that citizens enjoy every day that the city does, whether it's water and sewer or facilities or those type of services that all of our citizens enjoy and cherish every single day. And in a tight budget year, protecting those and making that those become a priority in this budget are important too. A lot of time, the budget priorities can be the issues of the day. And we felt in administration that a focus on the great efforts of our day-to-day work, providing those services to our citizens, is very important. And just want to reiterate that we will focus and will be focused on council's approved priorities. Every department will receive that. They will receive the message that these become part, and as part of their budget presentations to you all, then they will be able to report on how they have addressed these budget priorities within their department. So it is something, as this ongoing process goes, you will see together with you how that focus has changed. So as Michael was talking about the next level of discussion, now this stacks them in the same piece. And then I think it can really open up to that discussion, Catrice, that you were talking about. We also have slides for Gordon to talk about his priorities, whether or not that comes from this or moves to him on the next slide. And obviously you asked for Bill to be here too, to talk about code enforcement impacts on operational budgets all the way through. Any question on the priority side from administration? Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. That's manageable. And again, I like that we're keeping our numbers small. I think that leads to more success. Okay, any questions for Scott before we move on? All right, Scott, you want to go start with the owner occupancy piece?
So from our standpoint, completely know that these are the issues that they're focusing on. And I think you've seen many of the initiatives, and some of them started by council members and working with administration, like land trust, affordable employee housing. So looking for those ideas and those elements that we can implement and be able to do that. And administration is fully supportive of that and looking at that as part of the budget process, looking for those solutions, be it either through policy or budget, that we can tackle these elements. Also, the zoning update, not sure, I know we did the RFP on that, haven't we? So we have not seen the final number on that, but Bill, refresh my memory, is that part of this year's budget, or would that be a next year's budget that we would know the final funding number and just have to fund it next year?
It would be next year. We've put the RFP out. We've asked for responses by March 1st because I'm supposed to give my budget presentation to you in April, and I wanted those numbers to include in my budget presentation. So that's kind of the time frame we're looking at.
Great. Councilor Handley.
Just a comment on item number 1. I mean, I think as we talked about it, my sense was that was maybe less of a budget issue and more of a policy issue. Although I think maybe I'm speaking for everyone. I think we're open to whatever budget proposals we might want to look at that could help with that. But my sense is that 2 and 3 maybe were more expensive.
Yes.
Potentially anyway. I mean, we could look at, I mean, I guess if we want to get into the business of finance, helping with finances of home ownership, that's a whole different question. But given what you've said about the budget, that seems like, for me personally anyway, I would want to make sure we had all the right policies in place to maximize owner occupancy opportunities in the city before we then said, okay, now we need a budget solution to add to that, because that's not enough, right? I mean, I just don't think we have all the right policies yet.
Yeah, you're totally right, George. That is going to be predominantly a policy thing, and it will be a planning commission and council's zoning thing, right? In our meetings and how we articulate and make sure we get what we want in the city to be developed. But I know staff is already looking at multiple policy things, and I think it'll be an education thing. We want to do it, we want to be more proactive as far as education on the subject with our citizens. So I don't see a major budget thing, but if administration comes to us with things, we're of course totally open to that. But it's going to be mostly on our backs as far as just the council getting done what we need to get done to promote that.
Yeah, I mean, if the Spanish town hall is any indication, that that one gentleman was like, I've never heard of any of these funds ever.
Education. Yep. Councilor Christensen.
So I'm hoping today we can get clear, because when I read number 1, I don't know what that means. I remember back to our conversations, and we all said a lot of different things. I'd love to see something as specific as increase homeowner occupied occupancy in the city of Provo by 25% in the next 5 years. Something like that. So that it's not just a, hey, we want to help people. Yes, we do want to help people, educate people. But I'm thinking the bigger impact is really around zoning. I'm not in favor of another 200 unit apartment building that's for rent. Because all that does is move it in the wrong direction. If it was condominiums, I'd be interested. So I'd love to see us, and again, I have no idea what makes any sense there. It may be a much longer. But I'm okay if it takes, let me use the 60-40. I'm not sure those are accurate because I think it actually may be more than 60, but let's say 60% rental, 40%, homeowner occupied. I'd like to see a plan in place with a very clear objective and strategy to move that so that it's, 50-50 by 2 years? And Bill, you could probably give us a better idea. I don't know how quickly you can move that needle, but I'm okay with the long term. I would just like to see us get started this year with very clear zoning directions so that it's not a discussion, but it's actually some metrics. That's when these become, actually have some traction, is when we get specific.
I agree with you, Craig. I think, it's kind of like a New Year's resolution, right? Like if I just want to say, I want to be a good person next year, I'm not going to get anywhere. I need to do specifics. I'm going to try and be more honest. I'm going to try and say hello to 10 new people every week. I'm good. Like you need to get specifics, and I'm all down for getting specific. I think the last 2 years I've been on the council, we've not gotten specific, and I think we'll be a lot more decisive and have a lot more direction if we're very specific. Justin.
Just real quick to clarify. So last year, the council looked at both legislative and budget priorities. We got a little off track when we did that last year. And so the idea was to look at budget specific priorities. As staff, when we look at this and in the second agenda item memo, you kind of see this, you see some strike throughs in red lettering. And that's not so much, that's not to say that's a bad idea. It's to say that, and this was the plan to go over in the next item, that some of these are very policy specific and don't yet have a dollar amount tied to them. And so I think, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what's most beneficial for the administration is what is tied to a dollar amount that is important to the council specifically for the next year budget. I think the council's made it very clear that housing and homeowner occupancy is probably the most important policy goal of the council, and will be for years to come, because it's not an easy fix. But some of those things up there, you don't have a dollar amount tied to them, and it's not easy to tie one to, balance of homes throughout the city, finding this missing middle housing. Those are policy goals that I think, to reiterate, and I know I'm being long-winded, but I think those are things that the council will continue to work on. The one place that I see something is this zoning update that Bill had touched on. That's going to have a specific dollar amount tied to it based on this RFP. And if that's a priority for the council, because that zoning update will help you accomplish some of these policy goals, I think that's where you can start to narrow for budget priorities.
But these are all of our priorities. Some are going to be budget, some are going to be council, and that's fine, because even the homeowner occupancy one, it'll affect Bill and it'll affect his whole office. When people come in that they want to do the 200 apartments, he's going to say, hey, you know what, condos would probably go like that. They'd be approved. It does affect the administration, even though it may not be a dollar amount. It'll completely affect how Bill runs the office. So we need to stick to what we're doing, but some will have a dollar amount and some won't.
Yep. And Scott, tell me what you're looking for. I think what they need now is what does have a dollar amount, and the
So
council
you're just talking
will
about
continue.
sequencing. Let's have the money discussion now. Let's have the other one.
So are you saying that the council itself is doing a different one to go over? I thought this was all inclusive.
Just specified it. It seems like
It's
zoning update is the one that, a land trust could potentially cost us money, but we have to have a partner. We have to get, all kinds of ideas from them.
And this is the way I look at it, and this is, very specific to me, is you've got legislative and budget priorities. In my mind, that fits, and it might not for everyone else, but I think they remain priorities. You just bifurcate them so that kind of what you're talking about. One for the budget specific, and others for these are policies that the council is going to work on in conjunction with the administration, because it is going to affect them.
So when will we be addressing the legislative issues then, if you're going to bifurcate those?
We can do it whenever you'd like. That's kind of the plan on this second item is break these priorities out into these lists of budget specific dollar amounts and more legislative.
We're only looking at 3. I think we can get it done in 4 or 5 hours we have here. I don't think we need
Yeah.
a meeting for
No.
this, do we? Okay. Yes, no, let's just get this done. Counselor Bogdan.
So my question is, I guess more for Bill. So if we have a priority of a zoning update and a priority of enforcement, that's all in your department. Are we even gonna have enough money to cover all of that? Or do we need to pick one or the other, or?
So you're talking about 1 and 3?
Yeah.
So 1 will have some budget implications just on the cost of that zoning update. The other things I don't think are going to require any new money from the city council.
Okay.
Number 3 might, in terms of equipment, for example, I'll speak to this more when it comes up, but we have some equipment that needs to be replaced. That's gotten old enough that needs to be replaced. There's going to be a budget cost to that. But of those 2 costs, the higher one would probably be the zoning update. The staff's been able to do a lot of background work to narrow the scope of that, to lower the cost of that. So my guess is that we're looking at around the $200,000 range, something like that. I don't have the RFPs yet. We'll know at the end of this month. But my guess it's going to be something in that range. Okay. Can I just give some background on some of number 1 to maybe help understand what's going on? So a few months ago, y'all approved amendments to the Performance Development Ordinance, Section 1431. It gives a lot of flexibility in zoning, in approving missing middle type housing and alternative housing types. The new president of the Utah Valley Home Builders Association is a Provo developer builder who we've all had good experience with, who just reached out to me yesterday about missing middle and specific housing types and models of housing types. He emailed to me, and pretty much all of that could be accomplished under the changes that you approved in that performance development overlay. It gives us the flexibility we need to be able to do that. About a year ago, y'all put under contract, or you agreed to put under contract the Buckley Draw property to Anderson Development. Tara and I have been working with Anderson Development on that plan ever since then, and it's becoming ripe to come forward to the Planning Commission and then to you. We're going to use that performance development ordinance to help design that project, and we're hoping to get missing middle housing in there. The biggest delay has been, I have told Anderson Development, or asked them repeatedly, get a builder on board who's actually going to build this, and let's use his plans to take it through the process. Because we don't want to do a bait and switch, or we're showing the council one thing that we think a builder is going to build, and then when the real builder comes on, we have to change that product. Let's cut out that brain damage and just get the builder on board. So Anderson's very close to that, and that's what will allow us to bring it forward to you. On projects, because we've heard you loud and clear about your desire for interoccupancy, we've been telling developers, keep that in mind. We are negotiating the old City Hall site right now with OB Development. The purchase contract is being negotiated. They've already been told if that's not going to include owner-occupied housing, we've got a problem. That's a non-starter. They said, fine, they'll include some of that. Okay, and that'll all be specified in the purchase contract. A development just went to a neighborhood meeting last Thursday on an unexpected piece of property for multifamily on North University. That developer had been told if there's not any owner occupancy in this, you're probably not going to get it. So she's proposing some owner occupancy in that. So we haven't adopted hard ordinances to require certain percentages or those types of things, but we're trying to improve the situation as much as we can, short of adopting legislative solutions. I'm not saying we shouldn't do legislative solutions. I'm just saying, since we're not there yet, we're trying to do what we can with the tools we have.
What do you, from your experience, Bill, thinking about Craig's suggestion, what would you see as achievable but still pushing the goal as a percentage, like say in 2 years or? Yeah, well, just what's doable in the city. What is, if Craig is saying, for example, to get to 50/50 in 2 years? Is that even possible? Is that something that we could move a needle on?
In 2 years, no, I think to get to 50/50, you're probably looking at, 5 or more years. It's probably something like that. The biggest reason I'm hesitating on trying to answer your question is that I believe Lehigh has adopted 30% owner occupancy in their multifamily projects, but they haven't had one come through and get built with that yet. The developers that we've been encouraging to do this have been talking more like the 10%. I would like to talk to not only some developers, but some lending institutions to see what is realistic and what we can require without killing the project. I don't think it's true that in today's market, condos are still out of the question. Developers have been telling us that for many years, that you just can't get financing for condos. I'm not convinced that's still the case. But I'd like to get more solid information on some of those things before I make a recommendation to you. What I don't want to do is encourage you to adopt it like a 30% rule, that all multifamily that comes in now has to have 30% owner occupancy, only to have that kill development projects. That's not doing any of us any good if we're killing development projects, right?
So to move that needle will take significant time,
Yes, it will.
getting the 70-30.
Yes.
So, Bill, and I'd be happy to take this offline if you be more helpful. I don't understand the complications with financing condos. I know that one is more profitable than the other. The other creates a future revenue stream. I get all of that. Is that the reason?
Well,
Or is
when
there
the crash happened in 2008, 2010, we were told that the financial institutions simply weren't lending on condos anymore. And I think that was true. We've been a lot of years since 2010, right? More recently, we've been told, ever since that condo collapsed in Miami, lenders won't lend on condos. I'm not sure I'm buying that. I've talked to different developers and gotten different answers to that question. One that I trust very much and collaborate with quite a bit has told me that's not the case anymore. But I would just like to confirm that more definitely. But that's what we've been told for the last 10 years or so.
Because as I do understand the developer's desire to do apartments versus condos, just from a points. So it's always seemed like a personal preference that they hang on where there's a collapse.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right.
It just doesn't hold up. When I talk to developers, talk about school or Israel. No, it's so I was just wondering.
Well, in 2008, 2010, I think there was reality to that. I was building townhomes and condos at that time. We had been using the Royal Bank of Canada for years. Mid-project, they pulled our funding. They just said they wouldn't fund the next phase. And that was condos and townhomes. So there was some reality to that back then. I'm not sure it's a reality still.
Councilor Bogdan.
So Bill, is it appropriate, since we don't have any legislation saying 20% of a project needs to be that, when they come to us and they say, okay, we're going to offer owner occupied housing, can we ask them how much they're going to offer and then bind them in a development agreement that way? Because that's what they're proposing to us.
Yes, sure. But please understand that those requirements are good, and I think we should do those. But that's not, unless we're very careful and we not only commit them to do that in a development agreement, but we have other documents that would require, when the unit changes hands, that it be owner occupied for some time frame before it can be rented. And unless we do both of those things, we're not necessarily going to get more owner occupancy, because I can buy a house tomorrow and rent it the next day, right? So we want to try to head that off and do a couple different things to try to keep it actually owner occupied and not just rented by the owner.
So we
Right.
just kind of wrap that up into the development agreement until we get legislation in place? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I was going to talk to Brian Jones about some ideas about how to accomplish that. I'd like to do something a little more stronger than development agreement and CC&Rs, since CC&Rs can be amended. I'd like to do something stronger than that, but I haven't had a chance to have those discussions with Brian yet.
And Bill, with the new council, I would love to do another joint planning commission council meeting where you do that development training again.
Okay.
I think that would be pertinent to these new council members, and a lot of other councilors didn't come to that either, so.
So would we be looking at doing something like deed restrictions and things like that?
Yeah, something like that.
And can we tie the need for deed restrictions in with the development agreement?
That's what I'm hoping.
And the state's been talking about that too.
Yeah.
That's one of their goals, so like we would do the state goal too, yay.
Can I ask one more follow-up? So what I hear you saying is if you legislate 30%, like it sounds like Lehigh did, that makes it difficult and doesn't give you much flexibility. You don't have a challenge with us setting an objective or a goal as a council to do that. Because again, what I'd love to see here is what makes things work is when you actually have metrics and can look and see. So I'd like as a council to set like an objective. It wouldn't necessarily be legislation, so you wouldn't have any trouble with that. You're saying legislation.
So I wouldn't have any trouble with that. I also wouldn't have any trouble with legislation once I can verify that 25 or 30 or 35% is the right number.
Yeah.
I want to get the highest number we can without killing a project. Okay. Now also understand that for the last many years, most of our development requests have been for apartments and for townhomes. We have a lot of zoning in place to accomplish those things. Just townhomes.
So it could be
Okay,
either.
whether the developer decides to keep them all or that's I lost my train of thought. In order to push this needle as far as we're going to now start requiring 30% or whatever, we'd either have to amend the zone to require that, or we'd have to take away those pre-zoned properties. Okay.
Michael, you had something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to let the council know that we're, like, the council office is planning on bringing that meeting that property. Any idea? And I was wondering still.
Okay, let's push it till Bill's ready. Okay, that's worth pushing and making sure we have Bill's input on that. All right, so let's think about, Craig, I like your train of thought. Do we have a specific agenda we want for number one? Councilor Whipple.
Yeah, so since the only thing that we have for now that has or will have a price tag attached to it is updating our zoning code. I think that's good. What would be nice is as we're looking at the scope of what that update will be, if it's just the cleanup or if we're making these substantial changes, which could meet all of these goals, it would be nice if we had some anticipated numbers to go with that. Like in cities that have adopted this particular change for subdividing lots or whatever, they've been able to see an increase in new development or owner occupation by this much. So having those kind of numbers coming to us as we're looking at approving the contract and deciding exactly how much of a zoning change we'll be doing would be helpful. And that can get us what we need on Craig's side. Because there are lots of tools and lots of things that we can do to change in our zoning that could increase it, in all these different little ways.
All of it would help. I love the full set of tools that you have to use. What we want is the overall objective.
Yeah.
I like that.
So that's my only contribution on this little bit.
I assume it's something that's going to start slow, Bill. And then we will get policy in place that will get known by developers. They'll start thinking differently. They'll get creative. And we'll probably get some awesome developments that include more homeowner occupancy. But I guess we're probably going to have a snowball effect, right? It starts really small and builds. Okay.
Just to throw in an extra thought on this, it seems to me that the problem of requiring the ownership and then the possibility of it being flipped that we're going to look at, that seems like a similar problem to allowing ADUs and then it gets flipped to a duplex. So if there's a solution to either or both of those problems, I think we would all be very interested in figuring out what secures, mitigates against that possibility, or even secures it in some way. I just don't know what those would be.
I don't think you're looking at that, because that's my concern, is getting it turned into a duplex.
Yeah.
Okay. Permanently.
Scott.
Sorry, going back way to the original question, the council was concise in their priorities. In the past, we have seen a ton of legislative to budget, which made it hard for department and city staff to navigate. I think we're okay in this, and I'm sure it'll be another discussion. What's legislative? We're all on the same team, whether it's legislative action or budget action, and we can work together on these things. But I do not see a level of confusion here. We're able to discern which ones
Great.
we're able to
Great.
work towards budget on.
Okay, well, I think number one, basically our goal is to increase homeowner occupancy in the city of Provo to a more sustainable percentage.
Said to a 50 to 50% by the year, and then it's fill in the blank. Whether that's 5 years or 10 years from now, I'm okay with whatever is natural and healthy. We don't want to be radical. But they have something very specific we're working towards.
Okay. Councilor Bogdan?
Yeah.
Yeah, we need specifics.
But I'm also concerned with, like, West Provo, Southwest Provo has a lot of starter homes. Let's not cram all these starter homes where we already have it, because we already have issues with all of that. Let's create more of a balance. Give us some move-up homes. Give us some things that we.
And homeowner occupancy doesn't level it to starter homes. It can be anything, right?
Right.
We're
That's
talking-
what I'm concerned about, is.
Well,
that
that's
we
what
need to-
balance of home types
Yeah.
throughout the city, I think, captures.
Yeah.
That's,
I just want to make sure that's clear.
We all agree with you.
Because home ownership is high on the west side. It's just not a mixture of different housing types.
Just for your information, because of housing developments we're working on, I took a really basic home plan. It's actually one of the ADU plans that we hope to be able to provide people to build in their backyard, the detached ones we've talked about. So very basic entry-level house. I took it to a builder that works a lot here in Provo City. It's very reputable. I asked him to price it and tell me what's it cost to build this thing. He came back at $300 a foot. $300 a square foot just for labor and materials. Now you see why we're in the housing crisis we're in.
Yeah.
That doesn't include land costs, development costs for the lot, financing, right, architectural costs, right.
All right, do you want to narrow this down further? Will we just do increase homeowner occupancy to 50% by 2029? And then put as our budget priority zoning update? And is that good for number one? What do people think about that? Travis?
Dark. First of all, we don't even know the baseline number. We have no idea what best practices would be. Is it 1% movement per year is like astronomical, which it probably is because of how long it takes to get these things going. So I feel like our first, if we're trying to come up with some sort of like quantitative or whatever goal, it should be to just get the baseline numbers. Like, I don't know. I feel like we're just shooting in the dark.
No, I think that makes total sense. We need to know where we are and also where we want to go and what's reasonable.
So for like an actionable goal would be like direct staff to determine
What it actually is.
yeah, and where we should go, and like that would be like a victory, right?
and what's realistic in a town with 30,000
And
students?
best practices to get there. I kind of look at these goals as like, all right, last time we told
40,000.
you guys we want to accomplish these things. And I was, thinking like, okay, they'll come back with some recommendations. Here's how you get there. These are the budgetary.
I agree with the point you're making, but I'm also open-minded to exactly what Patrice just suggested, with the understanding that we're going to come back and try to give more quantitative analysis for what's achievable. But for the council to say 50-50 by 2029, I'm fine with that, as long as you're going to allow me to come back and refine that.
Yes.
I mean, I think you're sending the message you want to send, and we're hearing it, so fine with that.
I mean, I'd be open to, as we fine tune this process, if we go back and amend our general plan with with those metrics placed in there in print, rather than just a separate resolution that we might pass. Or I'm just a little worried that we create a goal that doesn't get into the major documents where we need it to be, so it's visible to future councils.
Right, pull up the map, how could we get there?
Right.
So I think what we're gonna have to do in development services is we're gonna have to look at every unit that's been built in the city over the last, say, 3 years. If 100% of those had been owner occupied, how much would that change this percentage? We're gonna have to start someplace like that
Yeah.
and just see where this leads us.
Even the difference between, I can't tell you how good it is to hear you say what you're saying. Because we're not saying, hey, let's get better. Let's actually get specific. And let's let that evolve based on data and what we learn. Travis, I think your points are well taken. Let's not study it to death. Let's start working towards it. All the tools we need, but I have a sense that you're really clear on what's important. And whether 50 is right or 53 or 48.
Craig, do we exclude the college, it's not in the college mixed use zone anymore, whatever they changed it to a couple weeks ago? Do we exclude that because that's like a college specific thing, or are we still looking at homeowner occupancy even in the college?
city as a whole.
I think we look at the city as a whole.
So even
And-
that college,
I guarantee you, if you built a condo in Joaquin, they'd be bought.
Yeah, and I think to Travis's point, at some point, I would imagine you do bust out the map and you do look, okay, where would this, because we want a credible plan, to get there. And so we'll adjust that goal based on whatever is reasonable. But I think it's just so helpful for us all to be clear, here's what we're at least striving towards, and we'll tighten that up as we go along. Either way.
So like this could go along too with our moderate income housing report that we have to do. If we're creating specific goals around this, then they would be incorporated into that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's possible one thing Councilmember Bogdan is referring to is the university designated housing that we don't control, like Riviera now is university housing.
Sure.
The Heritage, Helaman, which will never be owner occupied. So that's something to consider, to what extent that factors in.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I wasn't thinking of that.
I was just thinking of like all Joaquin.
Right.
Anyone want to make a motion?
Oh, I have one more comment, sorry.
Counselor Hanley.
If I'm not like piling on homework for Bill here.
You're used to.
It's a question maybe for anybody who's had conversations with BYU recently, which is not me apparently, even though I work there. I am curious because when they made their housing change, their policy where it was no longer the mile radius, that was a major decision they made that caught us completely off guard. And I am not sure what the impact of that decision has been. My sense is, and this is purely anecdotal, is that there hasn't been this huge out-migration of students elsewhere, and that most of them are still staying relatively close. And it's probably because all the contracts are there. They're, the student church experience is embedded in those neighborhoods, and most students, if they have a preference and have the ability to choose, they're going to choose that. But if we have any data on that from BYU, do we know anything at all about where their students are living now as opposed to 5 years ago, whenever the change was? When was the change? Like 4 years ago?
Counselor
It was
Holden.
only like 2.5 years ago or something, but I don't have the data, but anecdotally, they told me when I met with them that there hasn't been this huge dispersal of students. But that how it has impacted things is it's forced the housing options to improve, meaning to make upgrades and to improve their contracts and their pricing, because a student can say, okay, well, this place is a piece of junk and it's $500 a month. Like, I don't want to, but I'm going to go 2 miles down the road or 3 miles down the road now. And I have that option. So now they've had to be more competitive in certain ways. That's what they said. And that wasn't a quote from them, but that was kind of the impression I got from them. But I'd love to see the data, but that's basically what they said, is it didn't have a huge impact in disbursement of students.
So what's the motion? Is it, what do we
Okay,
What
I
is
want,
that
I
now?
want to narrow this down to not having A, B, and C and all, like as much stuff, like a goal to increase homeowner occupancy to fit. Now, all of this will be up for, we could change it down the road. We could
Yeah.
do study sessions. We can improve on it. But to increase homeowner occupancy in Provo to 50%. And then put the zoning update in there as a budget. As a, do you know, we're gonna include it all. It's everything.
Well, I would second that.
Like, we want balance, we want some starter, we want land trust, we want. Like, I just think when we start adding things, we can add 50 things.
How specific, like on A, balance of home types throughout the city, well, there's 2. We could probably come up with 12.
Yeah.
Do we need to come up with 12, or do we just say, let's balance of home types throughout the city? And again, going back to what Bill was saying, what we want is to use all the tools. So let's use balance of home types throughout the city, let's use zoning update, let's use land trust, and anything else that will help us get to homeownership.
I mean, deed restrictions and, you know, the missing middle projects and, which will have a
So I don't know that
balance.
we need to list all those things, because the getting to owner occupancy of 50% by 2029 then drives all of those tools.
And there's gonna be a ton of policy stuff that we're gonna work on.
I think Becky's hesitation might be that 5 years from now, we have new council members and nobody remembers this conversation. They just remember the end goal of get to 50-50 and by whatever means possible. So she wants to memorialize that we're saying get to 50-50, but using a good balance of homes throughout the city, not just on the west side.
Okay, so just make
Yeah.
it one sentence.
Thank you.
A goal of reaching 50% homeowner occupancy by 2029 through a balance of home types in the city.
Something as simple as that, yeah.
That works.
I would second that.
All right, we got a second. All right, so let's take a vote on that motion. Counselor Handley.
So
Do you have any
So
discussion?
this is setting a
Oh, sorry.
legislative priority.
Legislative priority,
did you say a year?
2029.
Seems like,
Ambitious.
that seems like Bill was indicating that didn't seem very likely, but
That's
I
subject
guess
to
it-
change.
It's subject to change and he was willing to support it, he said. So it could totally change. It's a goal, George.
Shoot for the
I'm for
stars.
goals. I'm for goals. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, let's discuss before we vote.
Yeah, again, I'm not bent on the numbers or the date. I just like that it gives us something specific and we're thinking in terms of metrics. That's what I like about it.
I like having the numbers. We haven't been, you know, we should be watching the numbers every 6 months and seeing where we're at and keeping it, I don't know.
And then we can refine as new data justifies.
Well, this you could actually scoreboard, and you could have west side, how it matches up, and all the land trust, starter homes, you could scoreboard the whole thing.
Okay, I'm loving the idea of doing a bracket and doing different neighborhoods in the city and showing who's getting like.
You can go as far as you want.
March Madness.
Rachel, you're in charge of the design.
Oh, man. So my only thought about this motion is I like this for setting a legislative priority, but we're doing a budget meeting right now. And so we're setting this as a legislative priority. Our only budget item for this legislative priority at this point in time is the zoning update, because we're not talking about putting money into the land trust partnership or anything like that. So I think if that's everyone's understanding here, then yeah, we should take this and move on to the next item.
Yep. I like it.
Makes sense.
Any other comments or ready for vote? All right, Counselor Hanley.
Did we get brackets or no?
Yes.
Counselor Bogdan.
Yes.
Counselor Garrett.
Yes.
Counselor McKay, yes. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Hopen.
Yes.
And Counselor Christensen.
Yes.
All right, guys, 1 down, 2 more to go. All right, we're going to move to Michael. Our first council priority is going,
I don't know that we designated that as the top or first council priority. It's just the first one in this discussion group right now.
okay, okay.
But it's a legislative
Legislative.
priority. But I don't believe we've decided that this is
Well, yeah, I mean, we already did this process last time with the votes.
Well, we did.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But we didn't discuss that in this meeting
She's just
today,
saying
so
it's
that
not
wasn't
like-
necessarily part of that.
It
motion.
was the previous.
Yeah.
Okay. Increase homeowner occupancy to 50% by 2029 through a balance of home types throughout the city. All right, item number 2, we'll start with Scott and his team. I believe Gordon will go over this with us, but let's hear the administration's response to goal number 2. Item number 2.
So what did we decide? I went to get a meal, but what did we decide regarding the zoning change study and such? Are we allocating dollars towards that or?
Bill is going to have the response to the RFPs by March 1st, and so that will be part of his budget presentation.
Okay,
But we don't have the dollar amount for that yet.
okay, but we basically greenlit that and it's gonna move forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me.
Thanks.
All right, Scott or Gordon, whoever's going.
Well, I'll just turn it over to my friend Gordon here, coming with some priorities, and obviously administration feels this is an important element, and really from an administrative standpoint, looking at safe school and, safe routes to schools as is a definite priority as we go through this. But Gordon may completely contrast with everything I've said at this point. I don't know. But Gordon, would you want to share some of your projects and ideas?
Yeah, so I thought what would be good is to show you what we're doing, which the highest priority is the ones we funded. The ones that just dropped off are probably the next priority. And then it would kind of give you a scope of what we're looking at as years go forward. We can look at it in terms of if we had a $10 million, I'd have a different set of priorities if I have $100,000. So we're going to show you how this budget works and where we are with that. And that would maybe give you context on how to do this. And so I have about 8 slides, 4 on sidewalks and 4 on active, and then we can talk about the other items. So I'll try to go through it pretty quickly. I need the, so, all right. So I'm going to start with the sidewalk element. This year, the biggest issues are around Wasatch Elementary and Shoreline Middle School. And so this is a big picture, and I'm going to zoom in. The green lines are the ones that we funded. The blue are unfunded, and I'm going to explain a little bit of how that happened. The red around Wasatch, we have a lot of areas in both schools that are missing sidewalks. And so red means it's not funded, but we would like to do these things. So let's go into what happened. So what we're going to do, the green ones are funded. So the green one, the school's doing, as you see all the way around it, there's a developer across the street that's doing a piece of sidewalk. So what we're funding, there's about $600,000 of a CDBG grant we got that's coming down Oak Cliff. It's a very steep road, doesn't have sidewalk. We're starting with the sidewalk closest to the school. We're also doing a $200,000 barrier as you come down Oak Cliff. It's a very steep road. It's a 50-foot drop off to the school, and the kids are going to be walking through there. So, and then there's a piece of sidewalk on the northwest corner that's missing. There's power poles and utility boxes we're going to relocate. So that is what we're doing for Wasatch this year. It's roughly about $800,000 worth of sidewalk, and that piece. Now, if you look, I show one piece across from the elementary school. This is on 600 South. We received a UDOT $100,000 grant. It's for safe sidewalk money. We're eligible to apply every 5 or 6 years. We get $100,000 in a shot, but this is be an asphalt path, temporary. So it's not sidewalk, but it's what we have for this piece.
So that also means no curbing, right?
No curbing. But we also are doing some sidewalk.
It takes 100,000 to just do asphalt.
Yeah. So it goes quick. This piece you'll see on 1100 is kind of a lucky piece for us because our utilities are putting a storm drain down this project. If they were not doing storm drain, we would not be putting sidewalk because that doubles or triples the cost, but they are putting a storm drain so we can put inlet boxes, because once you put curb and gutter, you need the pipes to collect the water. And so this is sort of serendipitous to us. This is a very important sidewalk to get in for this school. So this summer, they'll be putting in the storm drain. We'll be adding about 600. Yes. So we'll be adding about $600,000 to the project to put the sidewalk and curb and gutter. And that is our 2 projects for shoreline. Now, I'm showing these other blue projects. We're designing all these. They're not funded. They're not necessarily even funded next year, but we in talking to the school, these are gaps, these are pieces. This is not all of them, but these are the ones we have prioritized, that if all of a sudden money showed up, got grants, we would be running out to add these to the project. Some of these are actually sidewalk because we're missing connections. Others of these are asphalt based upon not having enough right of way, and we would make it a little bit more. And I'm not going to go through the details of that right now, but we could do that later. These are the ones up at Wasatch. They're missing sidewalk all over the place, and we would try to get these pieces done if we had additional funding. So now I'm going to jump over to active transportation.
Councilor Handley has a
Oh,
question.
sorry.
Question about 1450 East. So Catrice and I were at the Wasatch meeting yesterday, and then I had a follow-up conversation with one of the women who's working on the Safe Streets. Yeah, if you go back to that. So 1450, you've got the funded corner
Which one
on
is
Oakmont. 1450 is that
Yes.
long corridor there.
So in talking to them,
So there's no sidewalk where? Isn't it?
there's a whole bunch missing through here. They're also very concerned. They'd like to get some crosswalks across here just to start getting people gathered. Unfortunately, there's no handicap ramps. And so legally, we're not allowed to put in a crosswalk until we put in handicap. So each one of these are $25,000, $30,000 to do the corner. And so if all of a sudden we got another $30,000, we would add crosswalks here. We got another, because it's in the middle, that's the one we actually picked. Got another 30,000. And so again, there's sidewalks missing all over the place, but we would prioritize them in that fashion. We'd meet with this.
Yeah, so what came up yesterday was that if there's no sidewalk up there, that the state law requires busing where there's no sidewalks.
It may, I'm not familiar enough with that.
So I don't, yeah, I mean, I think the number was 90 kids are walking from above 1450 East down to the school. And there's no sidewalk, and it's a steep road, and it's a, I don't like that at all. So, I mean, I know why they want, the city to move on that. They're saying, anyway, I'm meeting with Sarah Ashby shortly to talk about it, but I don't know. I'm just wondering if this
Philosophically, we're
is,
starting the closest to the school. We feel that most kids will walk through this, and then we'll branch out over the next decade, getting the sidewalk going.
but over the course of that decade, you got 90 students every day walking down.
Right,
in
I'm
the
not
streets.
disagreeing with the need.
Yeah. So you're saying a crosswalk is $25,000, and if we were to build a sidewalk from
We're probably in the range of $3-4 million, but so I'm not prioritizing it because of the cost. But as money comes on, I'd certainly, so right now, this year, what you saw we did is $1.5 million. So that's the full budget. Next year, we're actually only looking at about $700,000 what we'll have. So it will be, and $400,000 has to go to a UDOT match, but we'll talk about that later. So,
but you don't know anything about this law about buses. Because I'm just worried about liability, among other things, like if the school, and maybe it's the school board's liability or it's the city's, I don't know which, but if you build a school and you say, we're not busing any longer, because that's what those kids have been doing, and you're expected to get yourself there by foot, but there's no sidewalk, that doesn't sound good. So but maybe the state law just automatically requires the school district to bus those kids.
I'm not as familiar with that, but
Okay.
again, we're sympathetic, not just for schools, but we feel like we would like to get sidewalks for people that are coming to the, we're aggressive in what we can do, and we're planning.
So what are your top 3 sidewalks you're recommending?
Oh, so the green, This year, the green is what we're doing.
Yeah, they're already funded.
And so then next year, we have approximately, can I get through the active transportation and
Yes,
tell you?
yes.
I'm trying to go really fast so I don't,
That's fine.
you're blowing my punchline, so. In a nice way, so. I'm gonna get back to, so each of these have priority, but because of so little funding, we would design all these, and if one comes up with a fatal flaw of like, we just can't give the right of way, or there's a very expensive piece of utility, then it drops off the list and we go to the next one. So it's not that this is the one we have to do. They're all critically important. We have kids walking every one of these streets without sidewalk. So that's where we are with it.
Okay, can I ask you a question too? Like, I live in an area where my kids walk without sidewalks too. It is everywhere in the city. It's not, except for downtown. But on 560 South, for example, I remember as kids, our sidewalk was all beat up and my parents had to pay to replace it. Is that our rule? Like, why doesn't that house have to do a sidewalk on their front of their home?
They've never, so that house is there. It never had sidewalk. So I'm gonna stand up and point. So there was, this came in, I believe this came in the county or before the city required sidewalk. These came in under the city and the city required the sidewalk. So the only time we can require sidewalk is if they come and ask us for a permit. So we can't go to a homeowner and say, hey, go get a loan, put in this up infrastructure. So we're saying, me, engineering, saying, hey, this is something we are gonna have to do. We're not gonna wait for redevelopment. If they came in and asked for redevelopment, then we get it. And this is kind of a quick, easy, and we can get permanent sidewalk as opposed to asphalt. So I look for that opportunity as well. Okay.
So
Gordon, I appreciate
millions
that.
and millions. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, Gordon, I appreciate that because I have had quite a bit of conversations with a lot of people concerned about kids, especially on the west side where there's no sidewalk.
Okay. So active transportation. So let me tell you some of the things that are happening this year. So again, I'll try to stand up. Hopefully you can still hear me. Is that UDOT and MAG put together and got us a grant for this, about $2.5 million. What we have to come up is with 400,000. I like this because you get 2.5 million out of 400,000, but it pulls from all the other projects. But this is going to be a high priority for me in next year's funding.
What is it? Sorry.
So they're going to go through and put bulb outs and take care where the curbs are deep. They're going to make it 6 inches. They're going to widen the sidewalks, all that kind of stuff through here.
So bulb outs, gutter, and widened sidewalks.
And signing if we want like flashing lights like the rapid. So it lists all the stuff and we're going to go through a design process. So it includes all the things. But when we do the design, we'll pick that out and make that an active transportation corridor.
And
Right.
isn't it already one?
That's designated.
Yeah, but they're going to put all the improvements in it.
Okay. I use that like 4 times a day.
Okay.
And
It'll be nicer.
It's great. But just maybe for context, this is one of the major corridors that we wanted to encourage students to use to get to campus, because right at the top on 8th North is where the sidewalk goes up to campus.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about.
Anyway, just so
Yes.
people know where we're talking about.
Yes. We also have, this should be green. This is funding. We just built the pedestrian bridge right here. We received MAG funding to build new sidewalk and bike lanes across 6 South in front of the railroad. This project would be under construction, but we're in dispute with the railroad on right of way. So
But it is funded.
it's funded.
Okay.
But we have to come up with a
Green.
$50,000 match.
Oh, we have need a match.
So when I say it's funded, I've set aside $50,000. Again, that comes from, that we can't use elsewhere, but I feel like, again, leveraging this is critical. And I would call this active transportation as opposed to just sidewalks.
So Gordon, is that on the south side of 6 South or is that where we're? Yeah.
The line should be on the south side of 6 South. So it's right along the railroad right away.
And so to get up to 2nd, are we gonna do some kind of a crosswalk or something there? Cause it's on
Right
the
here,
south
yeah,
instead
so
of the
that'll
north.
all be part of the design.
Thanks.
UDOT also got funding for university all the way up through here as well. So that's another grant, but we don't have to participate. That's on a UDOT street with UDOT funding.
So what does that include?
You're talking about, so they
University.
gotta do the design. It's about $3 million is what it includes, and I have not seen the design.
Okay, so we're talking about active transportation. So are they
Yeah.
talking about just like a pathway?
It's talking about, it can be anything that improves active transportation on the corridor. Then we are out to bid now on Lakeview Parkway. This includes a pathway on the west side. That'll be done this year. And I call that active transportation.
That's the northern portion.
Yeah, this will go right to the.
Oh, there's,
border
yeah,
form.
there's the.
And then it'll go over on 20th North, right? All the way to
We'll
Geneva?
build this road, but there won't be any sidewalk when we're finished here. This will just be a roadway.
And that connects to the.
So this connects
Traffic
all
is-
the way around to the airport.
Oh, wow, that'll be fantastic.
And then Orem's planning in 2025 to come in and connect to that, and then it'll go up clear to Vineyard.
So that's off,
Yeah.
the pathway is off the road.
It's off the road, so it's
like
I'm calling it
strollers,
active
bikes,
transportation.
walkers, yeah, joggers.
So is Orem gonna continue the trail from 20th North all the way to Vineyard
So Orem will finish that up through their city and eventually goes all the way to Vineyard.
with the trail?
It's part of their design. Part of their,
That'll be a good alternate to Geneva Road, right? Where they can have safe, active
yes.
transportation up there. Yeah,
Geneva's like,
okay.
yeah.
So then we've received some CDBG grants. So if you look right here on 4th East, we received funding for this. We're gonna do bulb outs, make this a little better active. We have a little better active transportation. We have an application in already submitted for this intersection, and we plan to move up as you go closer to, as you keep moving up to 8th North. We're putting a lot of focus in the Joaquin neighborhood. You have thousands of BYU students walking across 800 North into BYU, and it's mayhem. And so we have not, it's not a very good situation. So we're putting a lot of energy, but this is, again, just funding. We're also looking at the tree streets. We have a lot of places where we don't have handicap access. We can't put the right kind of crosswalk. So these are also grants that we're looking at getting right now. Those are not funded. The only one that's funded is green. Everything else is applications.
So you have applications in, and these would all be grants that require a match.
Yes.
But they're not approved yet.
No.
Okay, so I just want to say that intersection of 4th East of 5th North is one of my least favorite intersections.
We're gonna make it your favorite.
Yes.
That's our goal.
Well, and will you also be changing the parking along 500 North because the sight lines are terrible
We're gonna be pushing,
there when
all
you're on
that's
4th
gonna be
East?
done.
Oh, good. Because I seriously hate to go on through that intersection in any form whatsoever.
We have a lot of pedestrian traffic moving through these
Yeah.
and bikes and scooters going through these neighborhoods.
Well, and cars too, because you've got the lights on 4th East. It's a heavily trafficked road.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
So we're doing stuff. Yeah, anyway. Also, again, we're missing a ton of cycle. This is up by Wasatch. No funding. We're not actually applied for anything here. We're just looking at, we have the ability to apply for funding. We started and we said, okay, we just got to work on these. And then,
I'm gonna go back to that.
sorry, this is just a neighborhood that I know so well, but in my opinion, 1450 worries me far more than that because there's very little car traffic on those streets.
yeah,
Those are
that's
very-
why this dropped off. It's
I mean,
eligible for funding.
I would certainly like to see those sidewalks. I'm just saying, 1450 feels to me much more dangerous of a potential.
The problem with 1450 is it's outside the CDBG area. So the funds that we get this couldn't go there.
I see.
So everything's gonna have strings attached, but if our discretionary fund, 1450 is more important. Unless we need to match it for these, so that's kind of the balance.
Right, got it.
So-
What's the match again on CDBG? Does it depend on the project or is it always the same percentage?
It's generally about the same percentage.
what, like 80-20? What is it?
No, it's more like 7-8%.
Well, we have to make
Come
up
up to 7-8%.
It's a good deal. Yeah.
But then when the other grant we looked at was at 20%, when I told you we had come up with 400,000. So, but CDBG is a pretty good grant number for us. Where'd I go? Okay, this one is critical for us. This is 8th North, right across from BYU. This is where everybody crosses. This is, of the walking neighborhood, in my opinion, the worst street, and I'll just give my opinion.
What do you want to do?
Debate it. And so we think that whole street needs a massive overhaul. You're going to see some signing and some lighting going up, but we're doing the cheap stuff real quick. We're doing some striping, some nominal, but there needs to be some real physical changes that we've started laying out, but there's no horizon we see funding for it, but we're just going to prepare for if we can get something.
Now, just a question, something like that, does BYU chip in on that?
Nobody chips in on it.
Oh, of course, okay. Have we thought of asking?
We have
BYU?
asked.
And on the other side of the road, there is a sidewalk.
Yeah, there's
on
sidewalks. Yeah, it's missing actually a segment. Right through here, there's a
Right, that's right. But other than that, there's already a sidewalk. What's the value of putting in, that you're saying, putting this in?
Oh, so what we're looking at is crossing,
not
bulb
sidewalk.
outs.
Oh, I see.
So a whole bunch of active transportation elements to help get people softer walking across the street. It's terrible for cars, it's terrible for people, it's terrible for everybody. So we need to study and do a lot of physical improvements.
Have you considered making it a one-way street?
Those are discussions as well, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, it can't get wider, really.
No, we're not looking at widening the street, but we're looking at trying to make it better so that pedestrians, instead of just a free for all, we're platooning people better. We're making it function better. We're trying to get corridors. There's a whole study we're looking at. But again, people were asking, I was hearing what was priority for. I don't necessarily want to go into the improvements, but I want to talk about what our priorities here.
We'll keep you out of the weeds.
Yeah, and certainly we can sit down and talk about designs another time. And then there has been discussion about the pedestrian from the Carterville down to the Walmart parking lot. We've been in contact with the property owner, and they have not said they won't give it to us. They have a board, and they're still debating whether they'll give us the property for free. This sidewalk is going to cost us about $350,000.
If they give us money.
Yeah. Honorable mention projects that we hear a lot about, Carterville Road. I put these on the active transportation. We did get funding from MAG to look at a study to do in conjunction with Springville, the Spring Creek Trail all the way through. So those are things being looked at. So that's the end of the slides.
So I have a question, and maybe we're getting to this, but one of the reasons why I wanted transportation utility fund as a discussion point is I'm wondering it certainly seems to me that if we had more money dedicated to sidewalks and active transportation, we could accelerate these projects so that we're not always playing catch up. And it seems to me, and you oversee the roads as well, so it seems to me you have a good sense of this. I mean, does it make sense to say that we are now going to use a certain percentage of that transportation utility fee dedicated to sidewalks and active transportation? Would that compromise our ability to, fill potholes and fix roads in the city if we said 1% or 5%? I don't know what the...
George, we're gonna have a full discussion of that.
Okay.
Do you want to get into that right now? Or should
I'm
we
ready to
finish?
get into that if we want to.
Okay, but we still need the top three of.
Okay, so here's what I would tell you. If we had $10 million, I'd probably turn towards Center Street. I'd love to see this thing turn into this great active transportation mall. Certainly the city council would weigh into that being the highest. If we had $5 million, I would be looking at some of these large infrastructure trails like 8th North in front of BYU, or one of these really grand trails that would be really majestic and give a good vision of the city. If we're looking at $500,000, I'd be looking at asphalt, concrete, I'd be looking at 1450, I'd be looking at a few I'd be getting those intersections done and go through the money. So I'm trying to give you an order of magnitude. So I don't want to say this is my highest priority and then just be discouraged. We will take any amounts of money, and we have a priority for any context that you look at. And I've just focused around 2 new schools. There are other schools in the city that are still lacking some sidewalk and infrastructure that I would add to the list, but because these are the most needy, that wasn't the right term, the most in need of stuff, I would focus on these initially for the first few years while they're opening. So I could put together and show you this list and say these sidewalks would be our highest priority. If we see a fatal flaw and we only get $500,000, we'll do these 3. If we don't, this will be the one we do. If that's what the council would like, we could put that together. I think I tried to give you a scope of what we get for the bang for the money. And that leads us to how do you fund maybe more than what we're going to do? Because next year, we put in the budget $700,000 for sidewalks. $400,000 of it will go for a match for that 200 East project. So I'm down to $300,000, which I could do a few of the crosswalk intersections, which I am going to do because they've been talking to me regularly. And so we're going to do a few of them. So you can let them know you talked to me too, and we got it done. But we're also probably going to do some asphalt sidewalks on the west side over by, and that's going to be the project. And I'll pick the ones that I can get the longest stretch with the least amount of problems. So, and I've got to finish up the design to take you to that point before I tell you the exact one, but I will do it. We'll have them all done. We can show you that.
Okay, so do we need to go back to the images of the schools and see the ones that aren't funded?
We can.
Like our goal is to get specific.
Okay.
Our goal is to get specific and know exactly what our 3 projects are.
So,
and you're saying that in the budget that you intend to propose to us, you would have $700,000 given all the other restraints that are imposed on you.
And then I would reduce it by $400,000 because
of that match.
And so,
but if any of those other matching grant opportunities come up, then suddenly 50,000 here, 50,000 there, right?
So if the railroad agrees to our right of way, then I'm likely going to pull $54,000 out of that to match the railroad to do the active transportation. So I could have up to $200,000 to help with sidewalk,
which is not much.
And so if I were to look at this, if I had $200,000 looking at both this and this, I would probably do 1 or 2 of these intersections. And
wait, not funded, would you do that sidewalk right by the school?
So this sidewalk?
Yeah.
No, that's too expensive.
Oh, okay, okay. All right.
So I would do some asphalt projects through here or a little, I would pick $200,000 worth. I'd do 50,000 here and 150,000 over here.
Okay.
That'd be what I would do.
Okay. Wow.
I thought, didn't we potentially have like $1 million that is up for grabs that we had put aside for the West Side grocery store incentive that never got used, that we could potentially, I'd like to wipe out some of these sidewalk, get some of these sidewalks done for these kids. I had asked that we come back with an understanding of like what funds we have coming up available and how we can use them. And so did we do that? Based on last conversation, we had said we wanted to understand like what we can use that for, if there's any limitations or anything like that.
So speaking specifically to that fund, I mean, it is sitting in the economic development CIP fund. Now, whether the council wants to reallocate that or not.
Well, that was the question is like, sorry, can you review for me again? You have 700,000 and you're going to do 500 for what? And then 200?
So 400,000, I'm anticipating to do a matching with UDOT and MAG for that piece.
Yeah, which makes sense because you could get a lot for your buck, right?
Yeah, and then if we end up with $50,000 having to, if the railroad right away, if we solve the railroad right away, then I need $54,000 to match for 6 South. And that leaves me about 250,000 in which I would do.
Okay.
Prioritize.
Yeah, and so I hear what you're saying with one-time money with, but I think the question comes to the next item that Scott had on there was the UTF, the utility traffic fee. So our study specifically says that we can only use the fee for asphalt, 100%. However, the state legislature is passing a law this session. In this session, it opens it up and allows for other uses of that fee. It also says that every 10 years you have to redo your study. Now that could change in the next little bit. We have had it for 10 years. So we have about $100,000 plus or minus a little bit more to do the study starting July 1. So we anticipate letting the law pass, see what the criteria is, and then moving forward with the study. Today, unless the council directs otherwise, it would be coming back to you with specifically, this is how much we would want to have. Here's our asphalt. Here's what we should be doing. This is what we'll need to do to keep up. This is some ideas. You will vote on, yeah, that's the percentage we want. This is the cost. But you also have the ability to say, we'd like to add a percent to that will specifically go for active transportation or sidewalk or other kinds of things. You don't have to decide today, but you could ask us to study and bring that back.
Now you're saying you're going to do the study to find out what percentages we should be doing.
We're going to do an inventory of all of our roads. We're going to talk about the life left in the roads, how they'll function, what we should be doing to keep ahead of it so we don't have a big bomb of maintenance in the future. We're going to give you some options of what we should do. And then we can also study and say, and we'll say that's what it's going to cost per resident per year or per month. And then we'll say, and you, council, can say, we would like to include active transportation. We'd like to include sidewalk. We'd like to include other elements. And you could say, we're thinking that we'd like to have safe sidewalks all done within 10 years. What's that going to cost us? Was that, or I'm making up what you're saying, or you could say we want.
Careful what you throw out there. We're getting very specific here today. He loves targeted
I'm being
goals.
very general. So when we start the study, we could come to you with those specific goals and say, do you want to include these elements? I would want in the ordinance really specific to divide money that goes to asphalt. So I love our asphalt. We need to protect it. And then the other part could go for other things.
But the idea is that number is going to dramatically change after 10 years and.
Well, yeah, so you can make some decisions like that.
Councilor Bogdan.
So I just have a couple of things. So when you do that, does that mean that we just reassess the fee that's currently on the utility bill? And is the iProvo thing going to drop off this year?
February. That's the plan. We're working on that process right now.
So if we did increase that, that might even equal it out for the residents so that they would see like a constant. Just throwing that out there. So it wouldn't be an increase necessarily in taxes. It would just be the same fee, but applied someplace else.
Councilor Hanley.
Do we have any idea of what kind of a difference in that revenue we would have if the state changes the law on nonprofits and we start enforcing?
So the legislation now specifically states that cities cannot give exemptions. So anybody that has exemptions, and we have some, they would no longer be allowed to be exempted. So that would do an increase.
Do we have any idea what that would be, that increase?
Yeah, has anyone done the math on that?
We've done some math. So I don't remember what the numbers were. I have to.
That's a very safe thing to say.
Oh,
I think it was about $600,000 a year.
it was about $600,000 a year.
So more than double what we currently get.
So right now we get $2.1 million a year. And so it would go up to 2.7, very specific, 2.7 million
Okay,
a year.
I thought that we only got like 500,000 or something.
And so,
33% increase.
okay, very specific. And so what you could do is add another percent, but that new percent could go for active transportation or sidewalk. So there's lots of ways of managing that. I'm not telling you how to do that.
So you don't need, there's nothing, no action to be taken right now on that. We kind of need to
Well-
wait and see, or you want us to take some action today?
I don't know that I need an action. I'm just thinking you need to decide if you want to.
Well, the important thing is that we have learned that they have already put aside they've already put aside the money for the study, which is what we can't do anything without the study because we are more than 10 years behind in our study, and the new legislation requires a study every 10 years. So they're already ahead of the game. They're going to get the study in June, and then we'll come back with a work meeting and plan out exactly how we want to change our policy and allocate the funds.
Although I thought I heard you saying that this might be helpful, I would like to make a motion that we direct Gordon and his staff to explore possibility of allocating a specific quantity or a specific percentage of the fee toward active transportation and sidewalks.
And before
I'm open to your ideas of what you think.
So my thought would be this. I was trying to give you a magnitude of what it costs to do certain things that, and all of these are good things. There's not like on this list I gave you bad choices. They all, I think, have good choices, and you don't get to do them all. But it may be worthwhile to say, we would like to see about $1 million worth of sidewalk every year, or $1.5 million, or $1.5 million, or $500,000 for active transportation, to see those kinds of changes in our community. So I'm saying you're trying to enact some changes. You're trying to, how much do you want to enact in doing these things? And if you tell us an amount, then we'll go back to the study and figure out what that generates. So you don't need to say, get a 2% increase or 3%. We'll tell you how that comes. But I think a motion saying we'd like to have the study come back and show us some alternatives for adding active transportation and sidewalks to that, and then we can.
So that would be my motion.
Wait a second.
Okay.
I just have to correct, I doubled the number I gave you, it's actually about 300,000.
Oh, come on.
It's 300,000.
Okay. But it seems like we're not going to be able to, live up to our goal of having this be a priority if we can't actually identify any increase anywhere and any way in which we can measurably say we've done better in this than we have in the past. So I think we need to, it sounds to me like you need a clear message from us as to a ballpark of how much increase we're looking for.
Yeah.
Chair McKay, can I interrupt?
Who is this?
This is Brian.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
So I'm going to disagree with Gordon a little bit here about the way that I think you have to go about this. I apologize, Gordon, but
you're fine.
Because this is a fee, not a tax, the way that this works is the city has to figure out how much it costs to do something, and then they have to determine the fee that's necessary in order to accomplish it. So we actually can't start from the side of let's figure out how much money we want.
Yeah.
You have to figure out what it is you want done and how quickly you want it done, so that the consultant can then go do a study and say, it's going to cost $100 million to do it, and you gave us 10 years, so we need to raise $10 million a year, so the fee has to be X. So to the degree that you want to do motions, the motion needs to be, show us what the fee would be if we said fix all the sidewalks in 10 years. Or if we said do this active transportation project. So it's going to be really hard. Well, first of all, until the bill passes and we see what the actual language of the bill is, we won't know whether active transportation is even an option or not. And then secondly, once we even do know that it is an option, you actually need to decide what specific things you think active transportation means you want the consultant to determine the cost of.
So then we should probably table this until we know what the bill says, and then we need to
Agreed.
revisit and point to specific things we want done.
I like that.
Right?
Thanks, Brian.
You're
I didn't know you were listening, so I was giving legal advice.
But at this time, as a council, we do need to narrow this priority for this year.
Yeah.
As far as what we want to focus on. Councilor Christensen.
If we go back to the list of priorities, could we just put that slide back up?
So,
or maybe not.
This just shows.
As we thought about the list of priorities, I think what would be helpful is for the council to decide of these things. To me, sidewalks for kids trumps everything.
I agree.
I want all these other things, love the active transportation things, but that's the most important.
And we know we have very limited money this
Right,
year.
and we have limited budget. So I think one thing we could get clear about is, does everyone else feel the same? Or maybe everyone feels like it's Carterfield Trail or something like that. All of them are good. But for me, I would put the wood behind one arrow and get sidewalks fixed.
Yeah.
And then as there's additional money or other things, let's reach out to other areas.
Councilor Hoban.
well, accepting that we can get a good bang for our buck on that 400K, right? That 400K turns
I don't think
into,
it's
but if we're looking at, okay, we've got 300K, as much as I want to do the Carterville Trail, and I'm totally on board with that, if it's 300K and I'm choosing that Carterville Trail or, an additional 6 blocks of sidewalks for kids on that street that George pointed out, 1450, I think, I'm choosing that. I mean, I think I would put it behind sidewalks as well. So.
Councilor Whipple.
Yeah, and to be clear, sidewalks are part of active transportation and street safety. Right? They completely fit under
Yes,
that. So
yes.
by funding that particular project, we are doing that overall goal. Going back to your bigger thing that we'll be coming back to later on the priorities, maybe it would be interesting to look at how much it would take to accomplish all of the goals in our safety plan that we've adopted or the bicycle master plan. There's a whole list of projects that need to be done to make the city safer, to make our infrastructure more connected and complete. And so that's the kind of thing that would be useful to look at when we're talking with the consultant and creating that goal for the fee or whatever it is. And I know you're very familiar with those plans.
No, and I think that's a really great, because we do have the safety action plan that lists all of our priorities and what we need to do. And we also have our transportation master plan, which lists similar kinds of things. So
yeah. And so using the plans that we've already gotten to help us create the framework for these seems like a logical thing. In the meantime, I'm really, really happy that you're getting all of these matching grants and filling in the gaps as you can. Thank you.
Councilor Hanley.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I mean, I think I agree. Obviously, children's safety is the highest priority. It's just that those, it sounds like a vast majority of those are also CDBG projects where we're doing matching. So I don't want to like oversimplify the priority here, in part because I think what we're doing isn't just for 1 year. I know we need a priority for this year, but I think we're talking about a systemic problem that needs an increase in funding every year from what has been historically the case. Otherwise, we're never going to have the kind of mobility and safety that we want in the city. So my feeling is that whatever we do this year, we're doing it with an eye to, like if we can find the funds, if we can find the mechanism, if it's that I'm fully in favor of designating a portion of the transportation utility fund to, so I mean, in light of what Brian was saying, that feels to me like we not only need to figure out what to do this year, but we probably need a 5 to 10 year plan that we lay out, and that helps us determine by this summer what our fee is going to be. And we can tell the public, this is what it's going to go for. This is what we're going to get out of it, rather than just a sort of abstract, yet another, hit on the pocketbook. And hopefully the hit, whatever hit it is, if it is significant, or that it's mitigated by the Provo thing going away. But I think that, I just think we need to look at,
The utility fee, we absolutely have to look at. So I was thinking, if we need to do that at a further work meeting, around July-ish, they're gonna do their study in July, so we want to do it around then, where we can be ready for when they come back with results. Maybe it would probably just be actually with the results. I think we need the results first. And then we need the legislation will be first, then the results. Then we'll have to have like a serious work meeting to go over what we want to do with that, right? Councilor Bogdan.
So from what I get from this conversation is we're putting the cart before the horse with this whole active transportation and street safety, right? Because we don't have that final piece of what the legislature is going to do and what our study is going to be. So
We can still decide priority.
Yeah,
I wonder if
what we're doing.
make like the priority of trying to get the study done, right?
No, we have money this year that we need to spend. And so we're going to decide where it goes. We can decide that it goes to Carterville Trail, or we can decide that it goes to schools, sidewalks around schools,
Okay.
or we can decide that it goes to a four-way stop somewhere. You know what I mean?
Two issues, ongoing,
Yeah, that's their
the
two separate things.
transportation fee, and then right now.
But we're going to have around 250,000. And my gut would be to say that we should prioritize that around sidewalks, around the schools, with 2 new schools going in that are missing sidewalks. We all know about, we keep hearing it about it from parents, from like the meeting George and I went to, and you brought it up with plenty.
Yeah.
But it's only 250,000, that's not a
Yeah,
lot.
and we have an ongoing issue. We have a
That we
systemic
have
issue that's
to
not
nail
going to go
down.
away. No doubt.
Yeah, and I would also like to say that I believe the previous funding for sidewalks was $500,000 a year and have been for a while. And so that we're allocating 700 now,
No, so that
No?
500,000, we still allocate it, but that's just to repair sidewalks.
just to repair.
This
This is
700
for
is
the
for new
new.
sidewalks.
So are we still going to do the 500 for repairs?
The 500 is always in repair, so we're
Yeah,
repairing.
So we're starting to chip away at the problem that was identified through the sidewalk study.
500 only,
It's-
are we falling behind?
Oh, we are.
Because we're not
but-
using it.
Small amount.
We are.
We're chipping behind.
But this is what I mean by systemic, right? I
Yeah.
think we have to solve this problem. I would feel so good as a council if we solved this problem for the city and we figured out a way to more aggressively fund these things, because they increase quality of life, they increase public safety, they increase sense of community, sense of pride in the city. I think it's a really wonderful thing. And money is always difficult, but the issue of what we're funding here is not political, I don't think. I think this is what we want as a community. So if we can make it a higher priority, and we say $500,000 of maintenance of curbs falling apart when some of our curbs are regularly looking like war zones is not satisfactory. We should have more pride in our city to solve that problem, so that we just don't have that problem in certain neighborhoods where they feel like they're always losing out. They're the last priority. So anyway, I just think this is a great thing for us to try to solve.
So let's educate the councilors really quickly. There is $500,000 every year that goes to sidewalks maintenance. And the whole city is broken up into areas, and they rotate through this list every year, doing like 3 different areas throughout the whole city. So it's always in different parts of the city, rotating through, that is evenly done you replace them, what is it, every 30 years or something, or?
Yeah, and a lot of that money is going for handicap ramps, because we're still
Catching up on that.
we're just trying to catch up, and we're just
Yeah.
doing, so
But that amount hasn't changed
In forever.
the 2 years I've been here, it's been 500.
yeah, it's been.
It
6
started under
years at
John
least.
Curtis, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm
Yeah.
And
saying
we
is
kept
like,
it there, and
I
we
can't
keep-
imagine that's sustainable.
It's not.
It's not, but it's what we're there, and we keep it there, and so there's certain things we automatically fund out of our budget every year, and that's one of them. So feel good about that.
And we are absolutely addressing that this year in the utility transportation fee study.
Yes.
That is our goal.
And so I like George's idea that we try to find a dedicated revenue source for sidewalks and active transportation. And if it turns out that the legislature comes back that we can't do concrete or sidewalks with that, then I'm wondering if the money that we'd be putting into asphalt, we could take out of a different asphalt patch, like whatever, do you know what I mean? This fungibility thing, like how tight are the restrictions?
They watch pretty closely. They don't want to give you a revenue fund and then have you offset it. So I'll let Brian answer those questions when we see the
Okay.
legislature. They don't want to see you drop it in other areas.
Okay, so that's a
They're
question
watching
for
us.
another day. But to create a dedicated fund for this, so we always know that we've got money coming in for this, because this is hard and this is critical infrastructure. These are the services that the people expect to have in the city, and they're the ones that are most visible. They're far more visible than sewers are.
Yeah, why don't we do sewers?
Yeah.
Sewers are pretty important. Thanks.
People would sure care.
You now have both responsibilities.
Yeah, we do. We love sewers, by the way.
All of a sudden you love sewers now,
I do.
huh?
I
Okay.
do.
Okay, well, we need to get back, we need to specifically say what we want for this money this year in our number 2.
Well, and the other thing is he gave us a list of priorities based on how much money is going into it. And at this point, we don't know how much money we would have to play with.
We're looking at around 250.
No, I mean, like the overall
So
budget. Like, I don't think we're gonna get an extra $3 million that we could throw his way to make a trail.
Right.
So that shouldn't be the priority that we're going to.
Yeah, he basically said there's 400,
Mhm.
450 and the
If-
250, right?
if you're comfortable with what I described to you, how you see me prioritize the money, then I think we're on the same page.
I am.
Well, I want it prioritized towards sidewalks.
Right, that
Within
250.
there, yeah, that 250. So the 400 towards the active transportation thing.
And the rest would go for
and
either.
the 2 towards sidewalks that you prioritize. But I mean, I want them near schools if possible.
These will only be at the 2
Okay.
schools.
Then I'm comfortable with.
We've got to figure out where to get you some more revenue.
So if you're comfortable with how I described that to you, I
Yeah,
think
so
let's let that go.
The idea is that we are prioritizing the grants, and then any money not associated with grants, we're prioritizing for sidewalks at schools.
And I'm pretty much focused on Wasatch and Shoreline right now, probably for the
That
next
makes
couple of
sense.
years.
All right, so someone want to make a motion?
I move we do that.
Okay.
Is that good enough for you, Renee?
We are going to move, okay, the motion is that we are going to prioritize the supplemental grant money. And any extra money not used for grants will go towards sidewalks around schools. Seconded by Gary. Okay, any discussion on this motion? Counselor Hanley?
No.
Yes.
Oh, you're asking for a vote?
Yeah.
Yes. Wow, that was really adamant. I was like,
No.
Well, that one sounds.
I thought you were asking me for a comment.
I didn't explain that well. I was
Yeah.
confused on where the no was coming from.
Yeah. Yes.
Counselor Bogdan, yes. Counselor Garrett. Counselor McKay, yes. Counselor Whipple. Yes. Counselor Hovind.
Yes.
And Counselor Christensen.
Yes.
Okay.
George, I'm just gonna take that clip and send it to Mike Walk Provo and be like, who is this guy? You guys are friends with him?
Okay, you guys, let's take a break.
I have one
Okay.
more.
Counselor
I still
Hoban?
want to understand the $1 million that we have set aside.
We can do what we want with that.
Well, I want to know, are we,
we
does it
know
look
it's
like we're gonna be
released?
using it or not, or?
We're getting close to the contract.
Some of those.
So that $1 million incentive would be used for that. Okay, hold the horses then. All right.
All right, let's take a break, guys. We'll come back at 2:15.
I hope it wasn't.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Thank you, Malia. Okay, we're back from a break and we are on our third item, which is code parking enforcement. What is needed to do a better job? We're going to have discussion from Bill Pepperoni, our Development Services Director.
So we can talk about code enforcement first. I think that's kind of largely influenced by what the council has in mind in terms of enforcement. In other words, I think the staffing we have now is adequate for the complaint-based enforcement that we do. If the council's priorities are such that you want us to get more proactive rather than being complaint-driven, then yes, we would need additional people. So to me, it comes down to your priorities and what you're trying to accomplish. I know that there have been times in the past where we've been more proactive, and you tend to get complaints from citizens that feel like we're picking on them because there was no complaint and we just went and knocked on the door. And so it creates some blowback to you. So I'd just like to hear what you have in mind in terms of your priorities.
What you have to go through in order to put some action, that's live there, that's not there. All that stuff just sounds like.
So in terms of occupancy violations, yes, that's the case. The majority of our cases are weeds and junk and debris and illegal parking of vehicles, those kinds of things. So those are very quantifiable and measurable and much easier to deal with. It's the occupancy violations that you just referred to, yes, that are labor intensive. And I started my career as an enforcement officer and staked out properties, and I've been through it all. So yes, it's, yeah.
What is it that we as the council want to see as code enforcement? I think obviously one of our biggest issues is housing, right? That's one of our biggest concerns. But the opportunities there for Provo citizens to have houses to buy and to have a home ownership, and anything that increases the price of a home because it's a short-term rental illegally, or because it becomes an illegal duplex, or, you know, all that stuff is something we want enforced on. And then we have areas of the city that have had real frustration, right? Like, I'm having a mind blank. So yeah, the name though, it's Lake Canyon. Like Lake Canyon Drive and things like that. And I think a number of us have discussed, I know I've had discussions with multiple councilors that we are ready to do parking enforcement, have some parking plans, have change parking to be an indirect enforcer, right? And I think it's reached that point where that will be huge benefit to our citizens, and it will go towards our goal of home ownership. Councilor Hoban.
I was just gonna say, I concur that.
My thoughts around this were in regards to how can we use enforcement to encourage home ownership? And, you know, there's no direct way, right? But to her point, to Chair McKay's point of, you know, if we enforce an illegal duplex and that hopefully ends up turning into a single family, you know, locally owner occupied home, right? That's a good thing. So that was my intent as well. And then possibly even in regards to parking, you know, a lot of the concern we get around over occupancy trickles out into the parking aspect. And so, you know, if we're, and I'm not being critical, but there's always room for improvement, right? So if we're better at enforcing parking and then we get less complaints from people, does that allow us to maybe add more ADUs in areas where we're hesitant right now? Or at least, you know, personally, I could say I'm hesitant because I know what it will lead to in regards to, you know, parking complaints and how that impacts quality of life and such. So I think there's a parking element to it as well. And again, it all ties back to housing and increasing housing stock and ownership and such.
Councilor Whipple.
Yeah, I'm honestly not that fussed about over occupation of a property as long as it's not spilling out and affecting adjacent owners. And where we see that effect is mostly with things like parking or, you know, maintenance of the property, things like that. So I think if we did more enforcement on the parking issues, then we would address how these occupation things affect the neighborhood. And my understanding is that we probably do need more personnel to enforce on parking for the problems that we've identified right now. And I'm wondering how many more people, like full-time or multiple number of part-time employees, would be necessary to address the current parking issues. And if we wanted to use that as our proxy for these other occupation issues, like what would be the best way to go about that?
That's a good question. So I believe Sandy Busio is doing an excellent job managing that division, and just through her management of that and shifting around personnel, she's been able to create another full-time position for the field without having any budget impact to bring to you.
Wow.
So I think and Sandy's constantly looking for efficiencies without increasing costs. So I think that's one accomplishment. The need I have right now in parking that I can't quite solve myself is I've got 2 vehicles sitting out in the city shop waiting for installation of LPRs and accompanying tablets that I don't have the money for. The cost for those 2 things is just under $102,000.
What's an LBO?
It's the machine that sits on the vehicle that allows you to drive down the street and read license plates. And
How much?
for the 2 LPRs and the tablets that go with them, $101,958.
Okay, so we could appropriate that money.
If you would allow the income we have received from Bird scooters to be put towards that, that gets me about halfway there.
Where was the
That's
income?
income that's come from Bird scooters that hasn't been spent.
Well, you need the other half too. Could we
have
do
to
the
go with
other half out of the general
It
fund?
would be really helpful to find a way to fund this now so that my cars aren't sitting out there until July in the new budget year to get them.
Is there, you mentioned there's still some leftover money from that had been allocated for
The plans.
Is that, are we, Brian's still listening, but I don't know if we're allowed to use that money for something like this. That money's just sitting.
Yeah, it sounds like our conversation is turning to how we can get Bill this money today. And then we can talk about the rest of our code enforcement priorities. Okay, so let's do this side conversation.
That would be most helpful to me. I know that's not on your agenda, but.
Well, we would need to do this at our next council meeting, so it'd be nice to figure it
Right.
out now, right?
Well, so why don't we do this? George just asked a really good question. Let me look into that because that may solve the problem right there. And let me bring back to you some suggestions, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, there's funding that had been allocated for the development of some of our long-range plans that did not end up getting all used up. So I think it's somewhere around $300,000 that was sitting around. And then you mentioned the Bird. Both sound like good possibilities.
Okay, would it help Justin or Brian to make a motion to see if we all are willing to fund that and make sure that we get that done next council meeting?
I think if you give some general direction to Bill and ask that he come back.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion that Bill, to make a motion that the council's interested in getting the car parts funded and for him to come back with options and we will decide and vote on it at the next council meeting.
I'll second that.
The next council meeting next week. Deliberations a week out.
You
So
do?
we can't
Okay.
do it
It'd be
next
the
week.
March 5th.
So March.
So we couldn't do it you sure that we couldn't make it for this one? No?
We can't turn this around in 2 days? What?
In 2 hours.
Okay,
No, okay.
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 All right. John, did you have any idea about little
So
pots we
my
can
first-
look at?
Were you referring to money that's in the legacy?
You referring to money that's in the legacy CIP that was for the studies?
Yeah, it was for the
General plan and the
General
lakeshore
plan, the
plan.
lakeshore plan.
Are those
the
plans
gateway-
now complete, or do we owe any more money to finish those?
I believe we have paid all the bills. My understanding is we have paid all the bills on those now.
Yeah, so I don't know if we've got the report right here, but there's at least a couple $100,000 there that could be
That's
used.
what I was remembering.
Yes, and we could just transfer the money from the legacy CIP if the council wanted to do that and provide for these, that would definitely could be done.
So how about if John and I verify that and send email to you and have you respond to that? So that maybe we could do it on the next meeting, or is it?
If
It would have to be noticed
Yeah.
within the next 3 hours,
Oh,
so I don't think.
What else are we doing?
so notice it and then pull it if we don't get it done.
Yeah, that's actually long office.
I could tell you, if we know that all the bills have been paid, I can just have Kelsey confirm it, and I can let you know in just a few minutes if the money's there.
I just
It-
love the idea that we could make a decision and do something immediately.
I
Like, this
know.
is unheard of in government,
I know.
Malia. Don't stop us.
I really want the money for the next council.
I'm not the one that notices it, it's John's office, I'm on speed.
Let me work on it.
Hey,
Then I'll
the
get
sooner
back with
you,
you.
we're happy to give it to you whenever you can get it.
Well, so did we get a second on that?
Yes, second from Becky.
Okay.
Any more discussion?
Just one question.
Yeah.
Where does the scooter revenue generally go? Is that 50,000 per year that you get?
Yeah, well, that was new money that we had before, so there's not a track record. We just say this is where it's gone in the past. It's revenue that we've just received that we haven't allocated yet.
Is that 1 year?
And we were hoping to use some of that towards wayfinding. Talk a lot about wayfinding around the city, and some of that money would be used there.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Right, any more discussion? Are you ready for a vote? Okay, Counselor Bogdan.
Yes.
Counselor Garrett.
Yes.
Counselor McKay, yes. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
Counselor Christensen.
Yes.
Counselor Hanley.
Yes.
All right, so that's unanimous. As fast as we can do that, we'd love to do it. We'd love to
Okay.
do it next time, if not the time after. Counselor Hoban.
If there's another like 100 or 2 left over from that, then we add it
sidewalks?
to more sidewalks? I mean, you're just showing us money all over the place, John.
Well, that's the council's latitude. I mean, the money is there. I want to just make certain that there's no additional payments that are due.
Right.
Right.
That's all.
I guess I'm saying is after you do your due diligence there and it's determined there's another 150, could we then, if it's money that wasn't really planning to be spent yet, which it sounds like it was, I would love to say instead of 250, now you've got 350, right? I mean,
yep.
So I make a motion that John Borgett look into that and determine what's left over, so to speak. And then I guess we probably don't need a motion. Well, yeah, get back to us on what that amount is and then we can explore for possibly using that for more
Yeah,
sidewalks.
I'll have it teach,
Okay,
Right, all right.
never mind, no motion.
All right, so we got one thing taken care of. We need those, so right now they're not driving around, they're not doing parking enforcement. What are they doing if they don't have vehicles?
Well, we still have other vehicles they can use, but those two have the LPRs on them. We'll have them when we get this funded. Yeah, so that enforcement hasn't stopped because of this. So I think with both code enforcement and parking enforcement, we're kind of at our max. If you want those things stepped up, if you want more vigilance on Slate Canyon and those kinds of things, then yeah, that would have personal impacts. I would think that with parking, 1 or 2 part-time positions would be sufficient initially.
Didn't Sandy follow up? Did Sandy get back to us on that? I swear she did. Anyone remember that email? She did say she needed more people, but I can't remember how many.
She said.
Yeah, it was like a memo.
Okay.
Okay.
Parking enforcement. But is that same true for code enforcement or lawns, nuisance, things like that?
Again, I think we can maintain status quo. If you want the enforcement to be increased, then we would need more people. Now, the one thing that Brian and I have talked about that I'm not sure on is that whether or not another attorney would help us get cases through the courts. It seems to me that it's not so much on the attorney side of it is that once it gets to the court, it gets very delayed. And to be honest, most the judges we deal with just don't see zoning violations as a big deal that they need to be vigilant over. So giving extensions to people and giving them multiple tries to come into compliance seems to be more the norm than the exception. So even once it gets to court, it's not an immediate process by any means.
So an attorney wants to do that.
That was my recollection.
We
My
have had a
discussion with
thought.
Brian.
We've had a thought on leadership, and we've talked with Brian about this. And he said he talked to you, but I don't know if you guys have had time to talk yet. But Rachel and I both thought it would be so helpful to have like a tracker of enforcement things, right? The complaint and where it's at in the system, because that's a common problem. We get it from citizens, like, why has no one done anything, but this is still happening? And we could say, oh, actually, they have a court case, but it's not for 2 months. So it just helps with the expectation. And I think it would help. And I think it would help communication between departments. They don't have to go bug code enforcement or go bug the lawyers, but can look at the tracker
I
and
think we can
see
do
where,
that.
where things are. I think it'd be a huge help because we could see the tracker then, legal could see it, development services could see it, and it would be really helpful. Counselor Christensen.
Go back to something that Rachel brought up. Bill, is that a logical expectation that we could regulate the enforcement of parking and that could actually have a virtuous benefit of enforcing without having people stake out and things like that?
Yes, I think
is that
parking certainly has the biggest impact that the neighbors feel from illegal occupancy.
Yeah.
It's what we get the most complaints on. So yeah, I think increased parking enforcement does then address some of the occupancy issues we talked about. I think there is a direct correlation there.
Yeah, so even if the over occupants don't end up moving out, then they figure out a way to mitigate their impact on the neighborhood so they don't personally keep getting the tickets. And so the effect on the neighbors is you don't have this crowding and everything that's in the streets.
Well, I was thinking there's the other element too, though, of like regarding, and we mentioned this a couple times, but like somebody who has basically turned their home into a duplex, and then that home, it's not available, or if it goes on the market, they sell it for more because they already have renters, or things like that. Just over occupancy does impact, I think, the ability of the typical person to be able to afford that's planning to live there, as opposed to somebody who's buying the home with intent to, rent it to more people than they probably should, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I understand that there can be a family with a lot of people and, so I know there's nuances, but in general, I think that, illegal duplexes might tend to have more fair market value, than a home that goes to a single family.
Oh.
So that was kind of what I was thinking too in regards to occupancy.
Yeah.
I didn't want to discount that.
No, I think that's a really valid concern. The problem is it's a nuanced thing, right? Because an illegal duplex is like 2 bits of affordable or moderate housing that you then have in your area that you also need.
Yeah.
And while I think encouraging homeownership or making that more possible for people is good because you're setting their monthly payment at a fixed rate, it's not subject to change every year. They have more stability, they're able to build wealth. We can't ignore the fact that a lot of our residents are renters and we have an obligation to them too. They also need affordable housing. And so we can't forget that is the majority of our constituency, even as we're pushing for, this owner occupation that will help some of them. But back to code enforcement. Can we go back to the slide?
List,
Yeah.
the slide, Justin.
Now, we've also considered adding a parking permit zone or something at Slate Canyon. what's the cost of that to enforce on a permit program or something like that?
Sandy, I have asked Sandy that question specifically, and if we enact more parking permit areas, we do need more staff. We will need more staff.
So for each area that we add, is that another half-time employee or full-time? Like, could we add 3 more parking permit zones and then 1 employee would cover all of those? Like, I don't know how these numbers work.
Right. It's not necessarily one that could cover all 3, although that seems like obvious because you're trying to cover 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have somebody covering the night shifts, and so that's where the full-time positions are, because you can't get part-time people to work, at 2 in the morning. Those are the full-time positions. So my guess is it would be for 3 new areas. I bet you we're looking at 2 new people.
My memory was that she wanted 2 new full-time people. Because she said her memory is, I don't know if I'm wrong, but was that she's already understaffed somewhat, like it's already a struggle.
Bill, how many permits do we have? Just the one in Slate Canyon, or is that even permitted?
No. We must have 4 or 5.
I think that's the biggest one, right?
The foothills is big.
But the ones we talked about Slate Canyon.
Talk about Slate
possibility,
Canyon.
which would be a-
We talked about Joaquin. There's people from the east who have talked about it.
Now,
There's like, right now, there's just 2 okay, that requires some enforcement.
And there's different kinds to look at. There's no parking period. You can only park for 2. There's no parking between midnight or 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. or something. Or there's different options, which we have to do more work on that, figure out what our best options are.
We're now parking enforcement has 2 full-time positions and 5 part-time. The 1 full-time we're trying to fill, because it's the one that Sandy just created.
Okay.
So we're trying to fill that one in.
So we wouldn't necessarily know until that person comes on board as to whether or not an additional one would be necessary. Or
I think it's necessary.
Yeah.
Does she want 2 in addition to the one she's got?
So I think the full-time one takes care of one of the positions that
Maybe
Patrice
one
was
more
just referring to, so 1 more.
And does it make sense to do a parking permit program that is more restrictive, or to go back to Dave Harding's thing and do that kind of on-street paid parking rate thing with the zones? Yeah, like
take care of the occupancy issues. Like,
no, but I'm just wondering if that's actually a tool that would be useful to use.
Yeah, when we had a parking study done a couple of years ago, one of the recommendations is this parking demands are very unique to certain areas of town, and one tool doesn't usually work. But with LPR technology, you can get very specific and have different rules for south of BYU campus than you would have out for Slate Canyon. So to me, those are 2 different environments, and I wouldn't try to use the same regulations or tools for both of those.
Okay.
I mean, that recommendation said there's areas of cities that have almost not quite street by street, but almost that fine tune of their parking regulations.
Do we have
Different that much.
Do we have any areas where we have said between 1 and 6 a.m. there's no parking on the street? That's pretty easy to enforce. And that may be it's problematic in some other ways. Have we used that at all?
Yes.
That works?
Yeah.
And that
Well,
variability is
what are you
pretty
trying to
accomplish it, in most cities, right?
Yeah.
You know, to look on the street sign, see how good it is. It's pretty hard to do there.
Yes.
To do there.
And in places like downtown, we've tried to be very consistent all of downtown to make it easier for the public. Like we just put up 2-hour signage on our temporary lot because that's what it is everywhere else. And we were finding that convention center patrons were parking there to avoid paid parking that other people have built and are trying to pay bonds on. It's very fair. So we signed it like everything else in downtown.
oh,
I'll just say really quick, staff, Mike, when there's an issue request, chapter to look at Slate Canyon. My extensive initial research was standing in the sponsors for that. As far as Slate Canyon parking, initial research done there and some options. Trying to say that to the conversation right now.
Yeah, no, that'll be good. And we also want to have you meet with the sponsors and some citizens too before we do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this is just to help us, this is another priority, right? Another thing with the parking issues is I don't know, my husband and sons, they go to that Platinum on Center Street a lot for baseball cards or something. And my husband started to become friends with the owner, and they are moving because they're just so sick of the parking issue. They say that you just mentioned the conference people are always parking in front of their store and they just can't take it anymore. So that's why they're leaving.
It's 2-hour parking.
Yeah, but the conference people park there for 6-8 hours a day. And they said that
We're not getting enough enforcement on Center Street.
so
right
yeah,
now.
so I'm wondering if that's being enforced on. And I've heard the same thing from a couple other people, but I don't know.
Because we hadn't gone to paid parking on Center Street because it seemed like it was okay, there was enough turnover.
And
but
I think
maybe
it
that's
is
changed.
if conference people don't park there. So I just don't know if we're enforcing on the 2-hour thing or not, which we need to do that if we are not.
I bet if we made conference people pay for on-street parking, we could change that.
Right.
Yep.
We should probably run that by Downtown Provo Inc. to see if other business owners have seen the same thing.
Well, my husband did say, why haven't you told the city this? My wife said you didn't tell the city. And I was like, yeah, you didn't. And he did. He said, no, I didn't bother telling anyone. He's just going to move. I'm like, okay.
Where's the moving?
I will look into the enforcement on Center Street and see what's happening there.
Okay, so, but budget-wise, we're looking at, we would need 1 full-time employee.
For
And
parking.
then we also need to pay the fix the cars, the one-time expense on that.
And that's just for parking.
That's just parking, so that's not code enforcement.
That's one side of the parking enforcement. It's the piece of the code enforcement. We just have to get more creative. It's hard, Craig. I don't know what to do about the fact that it is so onerous to enforce on these houses.
Well, I like the idea of the parking strategy. Again, maybe it's a secondary, it's not a direct approach, but a secondary approach, and may be very efficient during that. You asked the question, what's the benefit of?
No, just specifically at night. I was asking why you were concerned. I was
Well,
wondering
because
why you were concerned
at
about that.
night, during the day, you can kind of move things around. At night, you're sleeping, and it's tough to move your car around. Like, I mean, you can do that for a little bit, but that's hard to sustain.
Yeah.
And it's
It keeps
hard.
people from moving into places that don't have decent
And from an
parking.
enforcement standpoint, you look down the street, are there any cars on the street? Again, from an enforcement, I would think, man, that's the easiest one to do. So I was just thinking
I'm
that's,
just curious.
What about software? Is there any software that would make your life easier in enforcement? Oh,
No, you've been funding Grantis software, which allows us to scrub for the short-term rentals. That's been very helpful. Number of software.
all right. So any more to speak about on this issue and this priority? Counselor
Well,
Christensen.
it would just be nice if we were more specific about what this means. In terms of what it is that we're looking for. Like, how would we know that we were getting to something that we were looking for? This looks like, let's head the right direction. Just wondering what that is.
I can think of goals, right? Like, I think if we get a tracker put in place, that will be a great goal. Something we can all watch, and I think we'll be more on top of things. Things won't fall through the cracks, right? And then we'll find our holes, right? Whether it's talking to the judges or figuring out the court system better or seeing if, I don't know, keeping track of things better where things don't fall through the cracks. Number 2, we know pretty of a surety that Slate Canyon needs a parking program. So we don't know specifics yet, but to get a parking program done in Slate Canyon and then address any other neighborhoods that we believe need. Joaquin,
That
yep.
problem's never been solved.
Could we actually include those two?
Yeah.
Let's get a parking program.
Yeah, in
I talked to
Joaquin
the
and
neighbors
I talked to the neighbors in Slate Canyon, they're like beside themselves.
For years.
They're like,
They
oh my
have it for
goodness, why
years.
is this so difficult to do?
Yeah.
So how about if we put that we're going to get something in Slate Canyon and Joaquin? Are there any other high impact areas?
Just a sec. So the tracker idea is primarily code enforcement.
Yes.
That makes sense. I think we may be able to do something similar to that in that Sandy gives you parking statistics every month. To me, it would be really informative. It would be if we mapped where tickets are being written, we'd be able to see what
Nice.
areas are concentrated,
And
what
there-
areas aren't. So I think that might be kind of like a tracker, but for parking. I am very interested in the Center Street situation because the over parking is causing problems with our retailers and that's got to fix. Then on the last one, what was the last one you just mentioned?
Parking
No,
permits.
what's Lake Canyon, I think it's pretty clear that the residents there want it. With Joaquin, last time you guys talked about this, there was a real blowback. So I think there has been a need for a parking program in Joaquin for a long, long time. But that comes with some heat you guys are gonna
I think
take.
we understand that.
Okay, all right.
The question is, are we willing to do it even with the blowback that we're going to get?
Yeah.
Are we talking about Center Street to Fourth North or
No.
all the way to 8th?
Like 800 north to like 500 north.
Yeah, like not
So
the other
beyond
way.
the residential.
Yeah,
In the,
More the
the
student
CR
area.
zone, pretty much, right?
I'm gonna be more prepared this time to know that when a huge group of students shows up, I'll ask, did anyone pay you to come?
And I think that the
But
enforcement may have to
the
be from
students
Center
don't wanna
Street
pay.
eighth north.
That's
Because if
understandable.
Well, I
we
know.
enforce
It's
that with
legit.
Fifth North,
That was the
eighth
main
north,
They don't wanna
we'll
pay.
just shift the park.
Yeah, you just shift them down.
More long term.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm ready to spend all my political capital on that. Let's go. So if you're with me, we can do
Well,
it.
I think we ought to be specific about both those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And that we put programs in.
And if we are adding 2 parking permit areas, then we really do
We
need
need to
another
fund a
parking person.
full-time parking person.
In addition to the one that Sandy magicked out of thin air.
Right.
Okay.
Bill, do we need to reevaluate the fees that we charge to justify the resources we have working on it? I mean, are the penalties they're paying covering the costs?
That's a good question. Yeah, we raised quite a bit of money through the parking enforcement, and we've been doing better at collecting the road. But as far as the proportion, whether we're out of proportion now, I haven't looked at that in a while. I'll have to check.
Sandy can look at that and come back to us.
It would be helpful to know. Yeah.
So our parking fine's adequate.
All right.
What about
Councilor
the parking-
Bogdan.
What about the fees for the parking program itself? Are they a little low?
Yeah, let's look at that too.
Yeah. It feels like an astronomical amount of money if you're a student and you've got a ticket, but relative to
How-
other
how much
cities,
is it?
it's incredibly low.
How much is it?
What do you know?
Then you don't pay it.
Then it's
Just the normal
55.
Parking ticket.
Yeah.
$3.
Yeah.
You charge 60 on that.
Yeah. So the amounts are low.
45. That hurts.
It,
And again, this will have a direct, the thing about doing Joaquin is it will have a direct impact again on these, it'll make the rental places up their game in parking and offering and, you know, what they provide their students. Over occupancy too. And it'll make a change for redevelopment too. When people do have to redevelop their units, they'll do them smarter and they'll make sure they have what their students need to appeal to them. Are we ready for a motion then?
all right, let me see. So I think what we have identified that we need is to be able to fund one more additional full-time person for parking enforcement so that we can add 2 parking permit areas, one in Joaquin and one in Slate Canyon. Is that what everyone else is
Yeah,
understanding?
but our overarching thing is still code enforcement on home occupancy violations. You know what I mean? That
Well-
was one of the bigger.
Yeah. But that's the budget part that we're looking at for today.
Yes.
Okay, well then I will move that we state our budget priority in this number 3 section is to fund one more full-time parking enforcement person so that we can
Add 2 parking
monitor
regulations.
2 additional parking permit areas, one in Joaquin and one in Slate Canyon.
Yeah.
Renee, is that okay? All right.
I'd second that.
I still want to say to indirectly enforce on zoning or home occupancy or something.
Probably not necessary, but
Okay.
I do have a question on that if we can go to discussion. I guess, how
Let's go to
does it,
discussion.
how do these specific parking permit areas help us encourage home ownership or owner occupancy?
Because it gets rid of the situation of over occupancy and of people making so much money from having 6 or 8 people living in a home because the parking isn't there, so they can't rent it out.
Basically, it makes it harder for somebody to, say rent to 6 individuals that all have cars.
Mhm.
And, they can't just tout like, oh, you just park on the street. Because the people looking at renting those homes are going to say, no, I can't just park on the street. You need to have sufficient parking for me on the.
So I went on a little
Okay,
neighborhood,
okay.
I went on a walkabout with the people who live in these neighborhoods and they showed I went on a couple of them. And they showed me these homes that are all like townhomes that have 1 parking spot, like garage. And now they've all reverted to illegal kitchens. So they're all illegal duplexes. They put an illegal kitchen downstairs and these places that were meant to be starter homes, for families or retirement homes have become student housing with 6 people in them.
Okay. It makes sense.
And that it would not be feasible. Like they'd be so inconvenienced. They would change the dynamics. We had to do this in Foothill where I lived when Arlington and Belmont, where they were built as retirement homes and they became student housing. But they only had 2 parking spots per thing. And they had 6 to 8 students in it was crazy. And so they all parked in front of our houses, our mailboxes and everywhere. And so we did 0 parking and it was a game changer. So it changed it still got taken over by students, but the parking isn't so insane. And a lot of them park way up in the mountains and walk down, but they're not, it's been more manageable.
Okay.
Well, my neighborhood had 0 parking,
Yeah.
0.
Yeah, I get it.
0 street parking.
So,
Right, any more discussion?
So we don't have the need at this time to define the parking for
No.
Joaquin or
No.
Slate.
Slate
That means timed, permitted, no overnight,
We'll
that's
work,
later.
yeah, we'll work with the neighborhoods, we'll work with Bill and Sandy and that'll be another work meeting.
Yeah,
That'll
and
be a couple.
we have a few months to do that before this budget would even take effect. But yeah, we would have our work cut out for us so that when we hit that new fiscal year, we've got the funding for the new person and so that the programs could actually function. And I suppose if we don't get the programs in place, but we get the other person, then there's enough parking enforcement need that they could just pick up the rest of the slack that's in the system right now.
Councilor Hanley.
If we're going to do something in Joaquin, it's probably also useful to think about timing. That if we're going to impose something, maybe say fall semester, ideally you'd want at least to alert people of the possibility of the change before the end of April.
Before they sign new contracts?
Before they
sign
sign
contracts
contracts.
now though, for the fall, like they're already doing
Yeah.
that.
Michael has it.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that, like, right now, I think we're formulating goals to potentially look at parking permit areas. And just doing a parking permit area is not like we decided one day and it's done.
Right.
There's an initial study, and then the council decides if they want to do a more intensive study on top of that, and there's like 60 to 90 days in between each of those when all these decisions are being made. So just
Open City Hall, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just clear the code, how that chapter is affecting. There's like minimum time.
Yeah.
Public comment. So
This will be a process.
we're just silent, and then they start talking about timing. so we can start that now, staff.
I agree with George's point that it should be enacted out far enough that students have a warning to adjust to it.
All right. Time for a vote. Scott.
Maybe just one comment before we assign staffing to parking plans that don't actually exist right now. I think maybe if the council could look at saying, look at parking plans in the area, and this may not get specific enough for you, but look at parking plans in the area and then work with staff to create the staffing models for these plans that actually go through. Because we're almost saying like, hire the full-time staff, and yet we still have all the work with the neighborhood to do and these things. I think if you could leave some flexibility and some ability to respond by the administration to this budget process, that'd be very helpful.
And that's so specific.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah,
if it met
I
the
don't think
standard.
we were planning to just.
No.
Yeah, well, the
I
motion
kind
was
of
kind
wanted
of
to,
going, yeah.
Because
understand.
I think that we actually need to have those 2 full-time employees. Sandy's already created one through her magic. And so I think we do need to fund a full-time employee, whether or not we get the parking permit area. But if we get the parking permit area, then they won't work unless we've gotten the second FT.
And even that, asking administration working with Bill to report back on the actual staffing needs, or maybe even get Sandy in the room and be able to have a discussion on that instead of and I don't know when this report came out, but it may have been some time ago.
I appreciate your pushback on my over eagerness.
I'm glad you guys are a
Yeah, I
council
think
of
that's
action.
fine. I think that's fine.
With
I was just gonna agree with that. I don't think we should be.
So do we need to do an amendment to the motion? What was it, the motion that we had, Renee?
Fund one more full-time parking enforcement person so that we can monitor 2 additional parking areas, one in Slate Canyon and one in Watkins.
Let's flip that language around and say, explore and develop parking plans for 2 new areas in the city, including the possible staff implications.
Yeah. I would second that.
So that's a substitute motion.
Yeah, but who's making the substitute motion? Because I like my original one,
George.
so I'm not changing it.
George's.
No, that makes
Okay,
sense.
and it's been seconded by Craig.
Excellent.
Okay, any discussion about that motion? Okay, we'll do a vote. Counselor Garrett.
Yes.
Counselor McKay, yes. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Hoban.
Yes.
Counselor Christensen.
Yes.
Counselor Hanley.
Yes.
And Counselor Bogdan.
Yes.
Okay, so we've made it through our 3 points. Now, we did have discussion about the billboard thing. The legislature's coming down with a billboard thing. Do we have interest as a council of doing there's 2 options. We could do a resolution, or we could do a letter to the state legislature and senators and the state body people, kind of like we did with the housing stuff. Counselor Christensen.
So, in talking with Isaac, it sounds like there's a lot that we don't know. And that's the challenge with the legislature. You don't know, and they vote.
Then you know.
And then you know. So what might be helpful is just to find out who on the council feels strongly about weighing in on that. And again, what the outcome is, I don't know, but it's like someone we'd have a pretty short window to reply, and it'd be nice to not have to get together support for that at the last minute, but just execute. So whatever is stronger, I would vote for. And I personally would be very supportive of weighing in as a city council.
Justin, I think wants to tell us something.
Chime in really quick. We're straying a little far from the noticed agenda item.
We can't.
If there's some general feelings on which way you'd like to go, maybe, I don't know. I know there was initial emails going back and forth and some text. Maybe let either staff or leadership know kind of where you're at, and if we can discuss in the leadership meeting. I think we can either get this on the agenda if it is a resolution or if it's a letter
Okay, we are doing leadership on Thursday,
But,
so.
just for, I'm the new guy, is that because it wasn't noticed?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Isaac?
It's helpful, I can give a little update on what I'm familiar with about this building. I don't know.
Is he allowed to do that?
There, it's on now.
It's much more authoritative. All right, that's kind of cool, this is like, yeah, it's a farming model. It's cool. But, so just my limited understanding, there's been discussions with the league, I'll just pass this on for what it's worth and so there is a committee that can designate new byways that are areas that you cannot have a billboard on. And that committee apparently expires this year. So there will no longer be a committee that can create a new byway unless there's new legislation. A bill was proposed that proposed a smaller version of this committee be instigated and that it would have a representative of the outdoor advertising industry on it. That received a lot of pushback. That got attention of the league of cities and towns. That was not successful. And now there is a proposal that, as I understand it, the mayor can't hear me. All right. So as I understand the new legislation, it would basically put in the same organization for that committee that can create new byways as has always existed. But instead of in the past, having the system where if the committee votes that there's a byway, there's a byway. This new legislation says committee makes their decision, and that's a recommendation to the legislature that has to take a vote. The additional piece of background on this is Provo Canyon is already a byway. It's a protected byway. I'm not familiar with any additional byway within our city limits that we could explore. So from Provo City, as I mentioned to others, I don't want to say too much, but I have feelings about billboards and could see myself in my own capacity doing something, but it's hard for me to see the angle for the Utah League of Cities and Towns to get involved in this or Provo City to get involved in this unless it's just a priority of the council members to ensure that more byways can be designated throughout the state of Utah. And that is probably a valid thing to consider, but that's what you're up against. And then the only other thing I would just factor in that people have mentioned, and I can see their point, you're going to the legislature. If there's a concern with this versus the old system, it's, dear legislators, we don't trust legislators. So please don't let yourself be involved in this. Make sure it's just, I guess that's what your request could be. You have to kind of decide what is your statement. Don't have this. Number one, you could just say, we don't let there be no more byways ever because there's no committee. Or you could say, reenact the same exact committee system that there was. It's probably too much time on this. I just wanted to provide a little bit of helpful insight, hopefully, of what I understand. And I may be wrong and this may be outdated, but that's what I've understood about it.
So I don't know.
Can we keep talking about it or not?
Yeah, I'm just saying in the spirit of what Justin raised, I think we should just can we make a motion that we?
No, we can't talk about it. So
Okay.
let's just, we'll go in leadership about it.
Can't move on
No.
No.
All right, well, I think we're good to adjourn this meeting, correct?
Is that their administration brought up a couple of their priorities. I don't know if that's something the council wants to discuss or address further. They
Let's look at them
included-
again.
The slide that has their priority and our priorities.
Yeah, there was one that had it.
That's it.
Okay, employee talent retention. That's a no-brainer, like what we just did with the fire,
That's the kind of thing that we didn't have to put as a priority because it's a given. Like, we are supportive of that.
The administration.
Right, and we felt that, but it's just that it does go in as as we're saying these priorities into budget development, so it definitely
And that's
memorializes.
going to be the first one, right? Like when you look at the budget, we have to deal with that's one of our first
John
ones. that
talked
we'll-
about those impacts just from the already in place compensation.
And we went through all this, we got sent all the stuff about that too in our, an
Can I
email.
just ask a question?
Counselor Christensen.
So, in terms of, the talent retention, that's where the department heads would figure out what they need to do, and they present the budget. So the department head is making the trade-offs in terms of, in order to retain talent, we need to raise COLA, whatever it might be. But the department head is actually recommending those trade-offs.
I think it's actually more of a centralized function in our operation, since we have a human resources department that are doing those studies. You're going to hear from them at the next work session.
Well, I'm sorry, I was let's say it's Gordon, point you.
Yeah.
Probably sitting right next to me. But Gordon would put that budget together and then bring it to the administration, again, the centralized thing. But I was assuming it's kind of bottom up. Is that not accurate? Or is this a top down?
I think the bottom has standards to work through. You know, it has levels where grades and all that are set for certain positions. Market study is done, which also jumps into that process. And then the directors have some latitude towards, you know, compensation within their range, within their grade. So it's kind of a combination of both.
The COLA is just top down. The COLA is just a flat across the entire employee spectrum.
Yes.
So we wouldn't be giving COLAs in public works and not giving COLAs in HR.
You give it across the whole board.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess the reason I'm
Craig, get
looking,
your mic.
I guess the reason I'm asking is, why does this need to be in here? Because this is something you would do, and the budget that you bring would include that, right?
Well, it doesn't have to.
Well, no,
Yeah.
you would decide the priority for that, right?
Yeah, they're right, which is why it's listed as a budget objective and a priority.
And you're looking for our, our support in that. and
Right,
our-
looking at, you know, where we're coming together with our budget priorities and say that is a priority to look at, you know, these compensation plans and continue to try to find ways to fund that for talent retention.
Yeah, rather than taking it as a given that we want to do this, he's making sure that we aren't saying, no, nobody gets a raise, everybody gets a pay cut, we are getting sidewalks right now.
Yeah.
Right? So is that basically the?
Yeah, sets that full scope of
Yeah.
priorities, yes.
Yeah.
I think it sends a message to the employees as well on behalf of the council.
Yeah. Yeah, and I certainly want to do everything we can to retain our employees because I know there's significant cost with turnover and training and there's a lot of inefficiency in getting new people in. And so we get cost savings by keeping our people and compensating them enough that they stay with us.
And I wasn't suggesting it was a good idea. I was trying to understand the budgeting approach.
Yes.
So.
Case.
I would add one other thing too. You could get to a point like for this year where I mentioned that we're going to have a tight budget. You get to the end of the process and you've been able to accomplish these employee goals that we felt like were very important, but maybe not some of the others. And you're saying we failed, okay, when actually we didn't. We accomplished one of our very important objectives we've identified, and we wish we could have done more, but at least then we know that it's up there and it's important.
Okay, efficient delivery of current and valued Provo City services, projects, and programs. And I believe, Scott, this is looking at, even hitting hard times, we want to work on keeping the same level of service to citizens while making things as efficient as we can, budget-wise, right?
Yes, the nation's best performing city has core functions that sometimes do not get listed as part of the budget priority process. So from an administrative side, we felt it was important to talk about these things that we all know are important, but make sure we memorialize those because continuing these valued programs and facilities and services that we provide are very important.
And we know some of our top values are the garbage is a huge one. Recycling is a huge one. The library is one of our biggest ones, and the rec center. Like these are things we provide service-wise that we don't want to fall short on.
But a lot of times rarely listed in budget priorities.
Yeah.
So this memorializes that.
Yeah. Great. And then the next one is delivering on, and thank you so much for coming back to us with with input and feedback on the 3 that we had.
Yeah,
That was really,
this is
really
an
helpful.
important process, and it is such an improved process just based on the timing. I think our appreciation on this just needed to be expressed. This sets a tone and sets a direction for the budget that is created to come back and work with you towards adopting.
And this is manageable once we make the changes that we've talked about, Justin.
Well,
Still
and-
has a few too many lines.
And I do see that our number 2, that active transportation and street safety goes along with your efficient delivery, right? Because that's one of the critical services.
Right.
So those are harmonious together. And certainly if we're able to help with parking enforcement, that's another one of those critical services that we do. So I like that our priorities are consistent with that second one that you've listed there. Although you're looking at all of the services,
Right.
not just these ones that we've prioritized.
They can fit together, and I think that efficiency is something that we're going to be reporting through department presentations throughout this entire time. Bringing this idea of efficient government and efficient processes. Not all of them are budget cuts, but showing better ways to navigate our systems. If we make this an initiative, then we can be a better government.
Yeah, the last that I have on that is if the numbers come in more grimly than we're hoping and we have to do cuts or efficiencies, I would trust that this priority list becomes what is cut last, right? So the last thing that we cut would be our employee pay. And then the next thing would be, these services, the council priorities. So if there's fat to be trimmed, we're saying this is not the fat.
But we're going to cut parking before we cut police. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Or I'm sorry, sidewalks before we cut police. You know what I mean? Like that's not a.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it would be lovely if we had extra money coming in that we could allocate to projects. But if that's not the scenario, then we're looking at where we're trying to save funding and not cut.
And we just want to be involved in the conversation with budget, what stuff
Yeah.
and what they're cutting.
Yeah, and I just feel like our city needs to know that too, because they want us to do all of these great things, but they also want to not pay for these great things. So giving them this balance, I think, is important.
Yes,
Chair
Justin.
McCabe, well, I don't want to speak too soon. I feel like we wrapped this item up. Are you comfortable if we take 10, 15 minutes, give staff a chance? I'd like to just get those priorities.
Yes, that's great.
Up on the screen so that there can be
I love it.
some quality control.
We
over
will-
what we're presenting.
Sorry, John.
I have an answer on the question that was asked earlier on the balances.
Remind us which question.
So,
Oh, yay.
so the actual amount that we have left on the studies is a little bit less than I thought, but it's 116,000. Okay.
So it will cover.
15,000 more than what you need.
We also, I did a little research on the scooter revenue as well. We carried over from fiscal 23, roughly 70,000, slightly less than 70. We have collected in fiscal 24 so far, just a little about 63,000. So there's roughly, 100 and, let's see, said about 130,000 in scooter revenue, and then 115 in the hillside study balance. And so there's some options there. Yeah. So.
Well, if you guys can work it, that comes to us next council, I think we're all very welcome to that. So whatever you guys can do.
Okay, we can get together and talk about it and see what we recommend. Okay.
Yeah, we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 3:25.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
All right, we're back and we are just going to, we've rewritten our list. So we have it all together, both the administration's and the council's priorities. And we're just going to go over them real quickly to verify that we're all on the same page. Do you want to go just read them through for us, Justin?
Yeah. So the first priority that the council discussed was increasing home owner occupancy to 50% by 2029 through a balance of home types throughout the city, and the budget priority being the zoning update this coming fiscal year.
Great.
All right, we're good. 100%. I'm going to leave now. Active transportation and street safety. And I don't know if that was the general category, if you want to rework that.
No, the general category was sidewalks for school safety.
Okay.
But it was under the transportation.
Yeah. No, that was the first time, but today we voted to change it to sidewalks for around
so that was my
schools.
question. Do we want to change it? Do we want to leave it as this? So the bullet point, the budget priority is prioritize the supplemental grant money for any extra money not used for grants for sidewalks around schools.
I'm fine with this as it's written. I think
Okay.
that captures the discussion.
Well, active transportation, street safety is like a bazillion things.
Right, but that's why we narrowed in on what the priority is, the specific thing. There's supplemental grant money that he identified for these active transportation projects. And then all the rest of the money in that budget would be for the sidewalks around school.
Okay, is that what everyone else understood?
Yeah, because you've got the supplemental, otherwise it's very broad topic.
Yep.
But this does say specifically what we're looking to do, so I don't have a problem.
Okay, so it's understood that the priority, right. But we understand that our priority is sidewalks around schools. Yep, yep. True.
And those grant monies were related to active transportation projects.
Okay.
Do we need to say that those grant monies were related to the active transportation projects or? Okay, then I
Yeah.
think we're good.
Okay. The third was explore and develop parking plans for 2 new parking permit areas in the city, and the budget priority being fund any additional staffing needed for those new parking permit areas.
Do we need to mention the 2 new parking areas or not?
I mean, we can be as specific or as general as you want. I think,
Yeah, Slate Canyon and Joaquin.
And I think Slate Canyon's actually a higher priority than what
Yep.
we listed first.
Right.
Let's go pick it.
If you develop the muscle, you're ready for this one.
oh, I'm OA, I'm AO.
There you go.
There we go.
It's like Wednesday, Wednesday. It's not Wednesday.
The other was employee talent retention, the budget priority that the administration had discussed and kind of fleshed out was funding for employee merit increases, cost of living increases, and market study increases. That was the 3-legged stool that they had mentioned.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we just want to rip the stool out from everyone.
They really do. And last was efficient delivery of current and valued Provo City services, projects, and programs. Pretty broad, pretty general. Wasn't sure if there was any specifics.
Councilor Hoban?
Under active
Transportation and street safety, do we want to include a bullet point about potential unused funds from the bird and, or the, was scooter revenue and what was the other one? The studies. So any extra funds, any remaining funds towards sidewalks as well?
You can. I think that's something you can do as an appropriation whenever you'd like. That's something that doesn't have to wait necessarily for the next budget.
Okay. I just.
Councilor Christensen.
I know we're doing this
I know we're doing this all together. I would suggest we use numbers. The first three are the council three priorities. The other two are council administration. Again, we're supporting those two, but when people wonder what are the three council priorities, I like having that clarity. And we obviously support the administration, those two priorities.
Like a capital I, council priorities, and then I.
Well, that was gonna be my next question. Do you want to rank these all five in an order or your three in an
We've
order?
ranked them.
You've ranked your three.
I think we've ranked our three, and again, we're not ranking the administrations, just saying, you know, we're all in. Makes sense, let's do that.
I think he's just talking about separation, so the public knows which three are our priorities
Yes.
and which three that we support the staff, city staff on.
They all are, because we supported yours. So do we just say council generated, administration generated?
Yeah, because we're all supporting him. I think it's just helpful to have clarity.
Yeah.
Can I make a correction to number 2 grammatically? It's kind of bothering me. Prioritize supplemental grant money, comma, and any additional grant money not used for grants to be used for sidewalks and around schools. Anyway, either that or we add that the grant money is for Second East. It's just that grammatically, it looks like we're prioritizing any supplemental grant money and money not used for grants for sidewalks around schools, which is not.
Yeah, so what it is we're prioritizing,
The minimal.
the
supplemental
matching
reports, yeah.
funds that we have to do
So
to
you can
get the
actually
grant money.
take out the comma after grants. Sorry. Just a little workshop. Word.
Jeez, it's like you're a
That's what the
humanities
word-
professor.
I don't even know
Can't-
my own
You
profession.
can't turn it off, can you, George?
I can't.
Yeah, because it makes sense to prioritize getting those matching grant funds, because that's the biggest bang for the dollar.
It always bothered me too, but sure, we'd roll with it. We all knew the intent.
Yeah, yeah.
It's clarified.
Good.
When's your next book, Travis?
So are we gonna add council generated at the top of the three, or we don't like that?
Yeah, at the top, council generated.
Does
Then
this,
do we want to wordsmith that 2A a little more? Because prioritize supplemental grant money and any additional money not used for grants for sidewalks around schools. Doesn't, might make that.
We need to say-
To be used for, you were.
Yeah, so prioritize supplemental grant money for the 400K, right? That project. I think we need to specify that project, don't we? Prioritize 400K for X project.
What street was that?
200 East. You can just say 200 East.
There were a couple of them.
200 east and then possibly
Yeah, but we're-
600 south if
Whatever
we get
grant
the
money
right
we
of way.
get, we're gonna prioritize it, because we only have to match it 7-8%, so we should be.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so
So
maybe just leave
prioritize
it-
supplemental
Yeah,
matching,
report.
let's just put in matching, supplemental grant money that requires a match, because that's the point, right? And our match is anywhere from 7% to 20% max.
Yes, Renee?
So
Prioritize
prioritize
supplemental grant money for matching funds.
Renee?
Sorry, from a grammatical point of
Prioritize
view, you could
any
consider
additional, so add prioritize again.
prioritize supplemental grant money for matching funds, semicolon, any additional monies not used for grants towards sidewalks around school.
Okay.
Thank
There
you,
you go.
Renee.
That's the better solution.
She needs to help you with your next book, George.
There you go. Yeah.
Any additional monies
Towards sidewalks, you need to add towards.
not used for.
Or no, I get.
You know what I would have done?
That's
2
okay.
bullet points, but that's just my.
What? What?
Don't you love this, Justin?
Travis, I'm
There's
not buying your
nothing like
next
writing
book.
by committee. It's
Oh,
really
I love
fun.
it. It's like taking my kids fast food orders.
No onions,
So much I
extra
love
pickles.
That's so true. All right, are we done?
Yes.
Okay, well, I've only been here going on 3 years, but I think I like this conciseness of this list.
It's good.
The best. We're making progress, and I think the more concise and the more specific we can get, the better chance we have of meeting our objectives.
Is this helpful for you? Have we
Oh.
given you what you need here?
Sequencing, simplicity, all those things, you guys have hit the target from our standpoint, so.
Because we can add 15 if you like.
I'm sure that capability exists.
Yeah,
You just don't want
Good
to.
staff.
We're just holding back, Scott.
I appreciate your restraint.
yeah, because you're right, we've made our priorities after you'd already, we're mostly through setting the budget, and that was just too late.
Right. It makes so much sense, doesn't it? You know, this sequence.
But we had to learn.
All right, so we're good to adjourn. If there's no objection, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Done.
See you, Isaac.